In the eyes of everyone around him, the protagonist of this story, Araji Kai, appeared to be an ordinary and gloomy high school student, but in reality, he was far from simple. Killer. As he entered his classroom, the other students began whispering amongst themselves. A boy named Midu Suji greeted him with a wide smile. Grown faster than she had imagined, she had decided to move forward with her plans. Narumi asked her if she was planning to send them to fight against the Demon King, but he rejected the suggestion, stating that he now wanted them to practice fighting monsters. This news left everyone anxious and slightly worried, but our protagonist was the only one who seemed genuinely excited about it. The next day, Gaius and Leonora led all the hero candidates to the middle of a forest. Gaius explained that they were there to conduct combat exercises. It was a place filled with obstacles, meaning they couldn't move as freely as a group. Therefore, they would be divided into teams of 2 or 3 people. Upon hearing this, all the hero candidates formed their own groups, leaving Kai and Kansaki alone. The two had no choice but to team up. Kai observed that the girl had a confident, apathetic, and proud personality. Leonora announced that, because it was a special occasion, the team that defeated the most monsters would receive a reward. Surprise! Soon, the combat exercises commenced. On their way there, Kansaki told Kai that his powers were superior to everyone else's, so he didn't need to do anything. For him to do anything, and asked him not to get in her way. Kai accepted the offer, and said he would leave everything to her. Seeing this, she asked him if he had no pride at all. Our boy didn't place much importance on her words because, at that moment, he sensed 4 hidden entities around them. One of the monsters suddenly pounced on them, and Kansaki used her powers to deal with it. Her power was called Domination, and it was an ability that imposed the user's commands on their target. She ordered the goblin to bow, and he was the soccer club's ace player and the class president. Kai returned, greeted him with a cold demeanor, and sat down at his desk. A girl named Nagas Rina witnessed everything and commented that Kai was being rude. He did exactly that. However, she seemed visibly tired afterward. After a few minutes, she explained that she usually got tired when she used her powers for too long because it consumed a lot of mana. Our boy then asked her to just kill the goblin because another monster was about to attack, but she seemed a little hesitant because, to her, the monster looked a bit like a human. Seeing how naive the girl was, Kai tried to reason with her, telling her that it was a monster that had, after all, tried to attack them earlier. Our boy picked up a rock and concluded that she was just a naive student from Japan who was too accustomed to peace. Our boy was playing with the stone when, suddenly, the other 3 goblins appeared. The girl, seeing them, quickly ordered the goblins to bow down and asked Kai to help her instead of just standing there. Kai didn't make a move and replied that she was the one who had asked him not to get in the way. Then, seeing that she had no other choice, she sighed and ordered the goblins wringing their own necks. And as he himself put it, just as the goblins had done by ending their lives right then and there, our boy was surprised to see that she could enforce such orders as well, to which she responded that, even though it might seem simple, she had to tell him that the more difficult the order, the lower the chances of it being successfully carried out. The girl, not being used to it, was disgusted at the sight of the goblin corpses, but Kai comforted her with his wise words, which led the girl to ask him how he could be so calm when he didn't even have powers. Our protagonist told her not to worry about him, since that was his strong suit. He asked her if she wanted to continue onward or return. As usual, she was a trendy girl who stood out from the other girls in the class. She approached Suji and sternly told her that she didn't need to greet people like Kai. Return if she was too scared, but obviously she didn't want to feel inferior, and she proudly rejected the suggestion. He knew that she was only trying to appear brave, but also, he admitted that she wasn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, Narumi and Asimoto were fleeing from a monster that was far too strong for them, but running wasn't a viable option, so they decided to attack the monster together, combining their wind and rock powers. Thanks to their combined attack, they struck the monster with a giant rock, but it barely scratched the surface. They were helpless and unsure of what to do next. Elsewhere, Kansaki longed to return to her own world, feeling indebted to her grandfather for raising her, but she also really wanted to show him how much she had grown. She was lost in her thoughts when Kai asked if she wanted to continue onward, as they were in danger of getting lost. They began to joke with each other, and she wondered why Kai was so mysterious and stubborn. Before he could even answer, they suddenly heard a loud noise. Kansaki recognized the voice as belonging to Asimoto. Kai asked what they should do, and she responded that they should obviously help her. Meanwhile, Asimoto was thrown into the air by the monster, and as a result, she was injured and bleeding. Even in that state, she asked Narumi to flee. However, it was already too late, as the monster was about to attack him as well. Luckily for him, Kansaki appeared at that moment and used her powers, and she ordered the monster to stop. Narumi thanked her, and she said that the monster was too powerful and could not be stopped for long. Kai asked Narumi if Asimoto was alive, to which he replied yes, but that she was really injured. Kai asked him to carry her on his back and get out of there. He was reluctant to leave, but seeing her, Suji defended him, saying that he might be tired, which was why he was so cold. Suddenly, another student entered the classroom, and upon seeing him, Rina remarked that someone, he left. When he left, Kai used his powers to see the monster's stats, and was surprised to see some pretty high stats, especially its defense. He knew that his attacks wouldn't damage him much, and he also noticed that he was a mutant, wondering exactly what he was. Kansaki shouted that she couldn't hold on any longer, to which our protagonist told her that he had bought enough time and that they should flee as well. Knowing that he had achieved his goal, she agreed. However, something terrible happened. She could no longer use her legs because she had used all her energy to stop the monster. Seeing how bad the situation was, Kai pulled out a smoke grenade and activated it. This gave him more time to grab Kansaki and hide. She was a little nervous about being carried in his arms, but then she asked him what the smoke was, and he explained that it was a smoke grenade he had made while everyone was training. Our boy was lying, as he had some equipment on him before being summoned, although it wasn't much. He didn't want to use them carelessly, as it was equipment. Basic assassin. Kansaki apologized to him, because she was the one who suggested they go save them, only to end up being saved herself. Kai told her not to apologize. Instead, she could thank him. Another playful exchange occurred between them. She told him that they should flee, but he replied that there was no need. At that moment, they both saw Suji and the others arrive at their location, and, without wasting any time, she attacked the bear for hurting her friends. Suji quickly attacked the monster and injured her hand. Rina jumped up and used her powers against the monster for the first time, but it didn't seem to affect it much, other than slowing it down. They jumped towards the monster again while someone watched them from a distance. It was a veteran assassin demon, even ruder than our protagonist had just walked in. The rude student's name was Arasi, and he was the leader of a well-known local gang. Some students greeted, named Delpis. He smiled and told himself that the armored monster couldn't beat the hero candidates because of their rapid growth. He liked it. They were quiet, especially Suji. It was supposed to be a scouting mission, but it was time for a change of plans, so she decided to finish them off right there. At the same time, Suji and the others were able to defeat the monster. Delpis smiled and was about to attack them when he was suddenly stopped by a dagger at his neck. It was Kai. Delpis, stunned at being caught, he was stressed and wondered how Kai had managed to get behind him. Delpis needed a way to escape quickly. However, Kai saw it coming, so he cut off his legs and threw him to the ground. Our protagonist asked him not to make any noise, as he didn't want Suji and the others to notice him. Kai said that if he answered some of his questions, then he would let him go. Delpis was unwilling to give up, but he had no choice but to respond, as Kai had him at his mercy. The situation was under control. Kai wondered if he was the one who had been watching him the other night. Our boy lets the demon know that he was aware they were being watched, and that his plan was to let Suji and the others fight in order to lure him out. Aside from this, our protagonist said that he needed information, since it hadn't been long since they came to this world, so he would have to tell him anything he asked. Interrupting briefly, Delpis smiled and refused, but Kai, without any mercy, then also cut off his hands and said that it would be easier if he just cooperated. Delpis told him not to underestimate him, saying that no matter what he did, he would never speak. The next moment, he consumed Arasi, but when he noticed that Kai was sleeping, instead of greeting him, he went to Kai's desk and yelled at him to wake up. He reached out his hand to grab him, but Kai reacted more quickly and grabbed it instead. Little bit of poison he was carrying, killing himself instantly. Because of what this individual did, Kai understood that it would not be easy to fight against the Demon King's army. Suddenly, Kansaki approached. He was shocked to see the corpse lying near them. Kei asked her how long she had been watching, and she replied that she had been watching since the person fell to the ground. Our protagonist, he explained that the dead demon was an assassin from the Demon King's army, and that the monster from before was his pawn, and when the first monster, a lizard, was seen, you could be sure that it was also his doing. Hearing this, the girl was a little scared, realizing that the Demon King was trying to kill the hero candidates. She asked him how he noticed the murderer when no one else did. Our boy thought there was no reason to hide his secret and confessed that his family was in the assassination business, so he could smell that he was in the same line of work. Kansaki was quite surprised by this revelation, and seeing this, our boy told her that it was up to her whether or not to believe him, and he asked her not to tell anyone about the corpse because the hero candidates were already shocked by Asimoto's condition. She agreed, also feeling a little surprised, since she didn't realize he cared so much. He responded that it was simply because they weren't used to fighting the way he did. All of the hero candidates gathered around Asimoto, who was seriously injured and lying on the ground. A student named Ano, who possessed healing powers, sat close to her and used their powers to heal her. Everyone was amazed by the display of their powers. She announced that Asimoto would be healed in about an hour. The hero candidates were praising. He let go of her hand earlier, said he was sleepy, and asked what she wanted. Our boy, not wanting to look like an idiot, also let go of her hand and started insulting her. Just then, Kansaki and Rin told them to Suji for defeating the monster, when suddenly Leonora and Gaius entered. The candidates immediately asked them where they had been all this time and why they hadn't helped when they were needed. Gaius explained to them that he had been watching over them the entire time, and that it wouldn't be beneficial for their growth if he simply saved them every time they were in danger. This somewhat bothered Sui, since Asimoto's condition was serious and he could even lose his life. Gaius responded by saying that risking their lives was a natural part of practical military exercises. That was the kind of battle they would face in the future, and therefore, they shouldn't make weak complaints. Sui questioned him, pointing out that the area was only supposed to have weaker monsters. So, how did the armored monster appear there? Leonora said that it must be because of the murderous demon, since armored monsters weren't supposed to be in that area. Gaius and Leonora decided strengthen their defenses for future threats like those. However, what they didn't know was that Kai had already killed the murderer demon. Leonora also added that they should increase their training level because, at their current level, everyone would simply die. Everyone felt scared after hearing that, and Suji tried to reason with him, but he told her that getting stronger was the only way to survive. As expected, Arasi didn't like that they were receiving orders, so he jumped up to speak with Leonora. But Gaius stopped him, telling him that they were all just Leonora's pawns and shouldn't think they could disobey her orders. The situation was heating up, and Suji jumped in to stop Arasi, since they had no choice but to obey them. Sujin pressured the old man, and Gaius told the candidates not to worry because they were important pawns. To be quiet. She was beautiful and talented, excelling in both martial arts and literature. She was the school's top beauty, known for being cold and distant. Arasi attempted to important to the country, and that no harm would come to them as long as everyone behaved correctly. Arasi was still not satisfied and attacked Gaius with his explosive power. But Gaius quickly evaded him and struck Arasi with such force that he fell to the ground, making it clear that they were all weak, and that, starting the next day, things would only get more difficult. More difficult for them. With that, Gaius and Leonora withdrew from the area. Arasi, with blood running down his face, got up and swore he would kill Gaius. The next day, the researcher in charge of the training, after a short discussion about the previous day, announced that they would be fighting monsters inside their research center. Inside, the facilities were full of all sorts of monsters, which he was raising for his experiment. Soon, the simulation began, or rather, the combat exercises commenced, and the candidates for heroes prepared to fight the monsters. Kai noticed that everyone was surprisingly calm, even though they were being forced to fight. The combat exercises were a bit much, and Shua mentioned to Steri that the monsters were too strong for the candidates, but Firme responded that Lenora had requested him to be very strict. He was to be strict with everyone, and therefore could not and would not make the training easier. Furthermore, he added that hero candidates with their divine protections shouldn't be losing in the first place. He added that the most important thing was their will. Suji asked if it would really make a difference, and he replied that if done correctly, then they could increase their power level, and even, they could unlock new derivatives of their power. Kai also joined them and told Suji that, in his judgment, he could see that Suji possessed a new power. Suji was surprised to hear that and confront her, but was interrupted by another girl named Asimoto, a serious girl from the discipline committee who really cared about order and who was looking at the list, ready to fight with Arasi. Asked Steri if he could test it out. Steri was excited to see the power for himself, so he allowed Suji to test her new divine protection. Suji used her new powers, and instantly, he severed the monster's power, following up with a clean cut to its hand and head. Kai realized that Suji would no longer struggle against armored monsters. He wondered if his judgment had improved and awakened a new divine protection. Kai also noticed that Arasi had received a new power as well, but decided not to mention it to her. Later that night, Arasi was plotting to kill Gaius, tie up Leonora, and interrogate her about how to return to their real world. Several other candidates supported him and were excited to escape this cursed world. Arasi asked Narumi to join them, arguing that they wouldn't get a better opportunity, and that she knew Narumi was also sick of this world. Narumi was hesitant, but ultimately decided to join their forces. The next day, Suji was training, and Kai approached him, commenting on how hard he was working. Suji responded that he still felt weak and needed to improve, to which Kai responded that with his current power level, he could defeat half of the knights in this world. Suji stated that it wasn't enough, because she couldn't defeat Gayu and needed more power to protect everyone. Kai asked him what he thought of Leonora and Galos, and he replied that he knew they were being used as pawns in their battle, but also knew that they wouldn't be harmed. Kai asked if he meant that he would risk his life until the Demon King was defeated. Suji agreed, saying that she had made a decision. He should be the only one who had to fight. He would become the hero of the country, defeat the Demon King, and try to negotiate and ensure that A boy named Narumi Yosia told Arasi to just ignore her and let it go. Yosi was a superficial and frivolous guy. Soon, everyone returned to their seats. This was the Anarasia others could live. Kai asked if Leonora would allow him to do it, and just then, she and Gaius entered, telling Steri that he would be in charge of the candidates' training while she would be out of the picture. Stedi was happy to contribute, and assured her that he wouldn't let her down. With that, she and Gaius left, and later, as they were traveling, he asked if she was certain she had made the right decision, prompting her to ask what made him think that. Then Gaius asked her to stop playing games and tell him directly, adding that, now, if she was plotting something, she admitted it, saying it could be considered a rebellion against them. He asked her what her next move would be, and she responded that she was curious to see what they would do next. Gaius was somewhat concerned about the potential rebellion, considering they were, after all, hero candidates with powers, which could make things disastrous but Leonora remained calm, confident that they could never defeat her. She added that they needed to establish a hierarchy in order to effectively crush the rebellion and break their fangs once and for all. He also mentioned that he noticed some other suspicious activities, but he would leave them alone for the time being. Later that night, Kay was in a fight against a monster and defeated it in the same manner as the monster he fought the first night. It only took 13 seconds, and when he used his judgment power on himself, he realized that he had leveled up. Suddenly, another monster attacked him, but this one was different. It was tough, and his swords couldn't pierce its hide. This was the perfect opportunity to test his new ability. He used his new power, which could detect the target's weak point. By detecting its weak point, he eliminated the monster in the blink of an eye. He was a professional killer who terrorized his victims, none of whom had ever managed to escape from our protagonist. Arajikai's classmates, so high school freshman class, and it was just another normal day. In a class with so many problems, Kai still kept his head down when, with this, he realizes that it wasn't a bad skill, but he needed more to survive in that world. He needed to become even stronger than before. At that moment, more monsters. They attacked, but Kai defeated them with excessive ease. Now, he needed a larger test subject to truly gauge his ability. He heard the sound of footsteps, spotted Kensaki, and questioned his presence. She said she was looking for him because he wasn't in his room, which was very thoughtful of her. He asked her to leave, explaining that the forest became a dangerous place after nightfall. He was accustomed to fighting at night, but she was not. Disregarding this, she shushed him and inquired about what he was doing there. Anyway, he told her he was testing his new powers, prompting her to ask what his new power was. Our boy, however, had no reason to tell her, and then he started teasing her. She confessed that she was worried about him. When confronted, she blushed and began to make excuses. The atmosphere grew tense, romantic. However, they were talking when they suddenly noticed smoke rising in the distance. It was a fire, and even though they were a bit far away, they realized that their dormitory was on fire. They both rushed towards the location and saw other candidates battling monsters. Seeing them, Narumi was relieved to see them both safe. He explained that when he woke up, he saw the fire and the monsters. This couldn't have been caused by monsters alone, so Kai deduced that it was the work of a human and that the leader had to be nearby. He told them to find and capture whoever was responsible. Just then, Stade appeared on top of the building and told them that their judgment was correct. Kai remarked that he had been wondering how he suddenly felt something, a strange sensation emanating from beneath Suji's feet. A bright blue light began to emit from the ground, and a magic circle appeared. Soon, monsters appeared, but now it all made sense because they were all monsters from his laboratory. He also provided them with some medicine to become stronger because they were too weak to be of some use. Kai inquired about the objective and what benefits he would receive from assassinating candidates. Steady informed them it was a direct order from his superiors and that he was instructed to destroy the candidates, even if it meant abandoning his current position. He smiled, stating he held no personal grudges, but he was obligated to eliminate them. With sorrow, they questioned if it was Leonore's command, but he refuted it, clarifying it wasn't that bitch's order, but rather the Demon King's. The Demon King's spy assured him that if he performed the task successfully, he would be offered the position of researcher. Kai questioned if he had succumbed so deeply to darkness that his sole concern was researching monsters. Steady claimed that monsters were far beyond the scope of human understanding. He commanded his monsters to attack, and Kensaki employed his powers to restrain them, but it was futile. Who quickly broke their spell and attacked her. Kai immediately jumped in and saved her, which thrilled her. While he was amazed by her powers, Kai continued killing the presents. Other monsters. He killed almost a dozen of them, and Starry was now furious since Kai didn't even possess a strong power. Our protagonist used the power of judgment on Starry and saw that all of his statistics were poor, but what caught his attention the most was that Starry had also mastered powers like Kensaki, but even stronger, and that was the reason why the power of Kensaki was nullified. He shook himself off and used something he didn't want to use, but he had no other choice. He told Kai that he would soon find out what he would use. Kai jumped to attack him, since he didn't. The class noticed it and were confused and surprised by what was happening. The magic circle grew in size, covering the entire area. Suji, who was on the classroom floor, ordered everyone to evacuate. Want to waste time, but suddenly a giant red dragon spewed fire at him. This was Starry's trump card. The dragon began throwing rocks at them, which caused Kai to ask Narumi to take Kansaki and leave. As the next attack approached, Kai once again used his power to locate the dragon's weak point, and it was the dragon's neck that he attempted to cut. But his attack power wasn't enough to accomplish it. Suddenly, Arasi appeared and attacked the dragon, and then started bragging about how she could hurt it, but the dragon didn't attack. Kai told Arasi that they had to defeat the monster together. Arasi asked him why he would need her, to which Kai replied that he could detect the weak points, but he couldn't defeat it since he didn't have enough attack power. Arasi was being stubborn and said that she didn't need the help of a rookie. However, they didn't have time to think it through properly, because immediately, the dragon attacked again. The dragon threw fire at Arasi again, and finally the stubborn one decided to team up with Kai. Kai explained that the weak point was a scale on its neck. He planned to draw its attention so that Arasi could attack the weak point with a destructive explosion. Starry, seeing that the dragon remained still, immediately ordered the dragon to kill them. The dragon ran towards them again, and Kai distracted it. Thanks to Kai's distraction, Arasi finally had the opportunity to attack the dragon's weak point. With just one blow to the weak point, the dragon was defeated in the blink of an eye. At this, Kai asked Starry if he had anything else up his sleeve, since his trump card had failed. Starry said that he still had other monsters, but unfortunately, Suji and the others had already defeated them all. Starry tried to flee, but he was caught by the classroom. But Kai knew they wouldn't be able to escape in time. The bright light blinded them all, and they were teleported to what appeared to be an old castle. Narumi. Kai asked him to tell them everything, and he readily agreed since he was a coward, but before he could say anything, his body turned purple, and he died. He was cursed to die the instant he tried to leak any information. The following day, the candidates confronted Leonora upon her return, as she was the one who had left Stady in charge. She apologized, explaining that she didn't believe a demon as weak as him could cause so much damage. The candidates were surprised to learn that she was already aware the demon tamer was a spy. They questioned why, if she knew he was a demon spy, she had allowed him to be near them. In her defense, she stated that she had already warned them their training would be more difficult, and therefore, what happened was simply part of their training. Gallus accused them of not being careful enough and for failing to stay alert during the night. Turning to the main topic at hand, Leonora informed them that they would all be visiting the royal capital. Next, focusing on the unveiling of the hero candidates was to be held with a public parade in the royal capital, where they would take the stage as the main attractions. That night, everyone departed for the capital. They camped in a field that night while eating. Ross told his henchmen that there were about 30 soldiers accompanying them, and that they weren't actually that strong. He declared that it was time to put their plan into action, and from what he could tell, they could easily outnumber them. He asked one of his henchmen to summon Narumi and her group. Gay was listening to their conversation and agreed that there were very few soldiers escorting them, but that was only because Gaius and Leonora were confident that they could defeat them on their own. They were all unconscious on the ground, and Kai was the first to regain consciousness. He noticed that the building was made of stone, with several large pillars providing cover, and there was only... Our boy then went to Suji and asked to speak with her later. That night, Arasi and Narumi met in the nearby forest, ready to attack. The soldiers appeared when Suji and the other candidates stood in his way, stopping him. Suji said that she had heard that Arasi was trying to kill Leonora and Gallos. Arasi was surprised to learn that her plan had somehow been leaked. They tried to reason with him, telling him that there might be another way besides just going and eliminating them. Arasi told Suji that all he did was talk and asked if he even had a plan, to which he replied that he would act as a pawn and defeat the Demon King and, in return, would ensure everyone's safety. Arasi wasn't ready for these Kratos types and told him to get out of his way, but Suji and the others weren't going to let him pass, since they couldn't come to an agreement, to the point where they started fighting. Suddenly, 2 soldiers entered and told them to get some sleep since they had an early morning trip. Because of this, Arasi left, saying he was fed up with their weakness and that there was no point in talking to them. The next day, they all arrived at the royal capital, which was overly crowded because of the people on the streets were amazed to see the hero candidates. The people, it seemed, had a great deal of faith in them. At the castle, they were received by the Holy Knight Rhines, who asked them to rest first. All the candidates were pleased and happy to receive such royal treatment, from soft beds to hot baths. The hero candidates were also offered the finest food. While they were enjoying all of this, Kai decided to gather more information, but there were too many guards. Suddenly, he saw one exit. Soon, the other students also began to regain their senses. Everyone was panicking, but Suji calmed them down, and Kai felt relieved that the knight who was showing them around was talking to his soldiers about how the hero candidates were stronger than normal children of their age. One of the soldiers voiced his concern about allowing the hero candidates into the royal capital, as the followers of the Demon Kings, as they knew, were actively searching for them. He believed that this would provoke the demons into taking action. Rhinus reassured them not to worry, because the candidates were strong and capable of handling anything. The person who had been listening to everything now had even more questions, so he decided to go to the city. That evening, he went to a pub and ordered a beer and some snacks. People were discussing the hero candidates and how they seemed like ordinary children. Based on what he overheard, our guy realized that the people there were more afraid of the church than they were of the king or the nobles. Kay asked the bartender to tell him more about the country, explaining that he was new to the city and didn't know much. The bartender then began to tell him about the king, demon, and the way he was attacking the kingdom. He also added that the Demon King could even seduce humans with his overwhelming power. He also told him how the Demon King's followers, Demon, blew up a noble property a few days ago. After hearing all this, Kai left the bar, thinking that operating blindly with the candidates in the capital wasn't the best approach. Suddenly, Kansaki approached him because she was worried about him. Our boy explained that he was collecting information since they were in unknown territory. She was visibly worried and told him that she could help him, but he refused, and she didn't like his attitude. After a small discussion, he finally, that Suji was someone who could prevent the entire class from losing their composure. Arasi stood up and said that they couldn't waste any time, asking his 2 henchmen to follow him. Kai agreed to let her help him. Kai asked her to gather information about the royal capital, and she immediately left to gather information, just like Kai. However, what they didn't know was that someone was eavesdropping on their entire conversation. The mysterious man smiled as he watched her walk away. Kai finally went back to his room, but, after a tedious search, he didn't find anything of importance, but at least he became aware of the existence of a new enemy. Suddenly, he heard noises coming from outside his room, and when he went out, he saw the other candidates gathered in the hallway. When he inquired, he learned that Kansaki was missing. The others hadn't even realized that. He was also gone because he didn't share his room with anyone. When asked if he knew anything about the girl, Kai denied knowing anything at all. Suji concluded that she wasn't in the Prower castle, and since the sun would be rising soon, they should go out and search for her. Immediately, everyone scattered to look for her. Moments later, Kai found her student ID lying on the ground in the street. The moment he picked it up, 4 masked men attacked him, but his reaction time was so quick that he instantly took down 3 of them. And he asked the 4th one who he was, realizing they were all fairly inexperienced spies. The 4th spy was too stunned to run away, and Kai demanded he tell him everything he knew. Meanwhile, In what appeared to be a castle, Kansaki was tied up and being held captive. 2 spies were interrogating her, but she wasn't responding to their questions. They wanted to know about the hero candidates, but seeing that she wasn't cooperating, one of the spies ripped her shirt. Unbeknownst to them, Kai was already inside, and he stopped him, saying he could hear footsteps approaching from the other side of the door. Kai sensed that a man and a woman were entering. Soon, the door opened, and a girl, spying on them. He used his powers of judgment and noticed that they were quite weak, and he couldn't believe the girl had been captured by normal guys. Since they were just normal people, Kai had no problem. Time to take care of them. After that, he approached the girl and felt ashamed seeing her in her exposed state. He unlocked her chains and was about to leave when he sensed someone approaching. He sped towards them. It was Rines, who attacked without delay, but luckily they both dodged his attack. He smiled and said he really should kill them. He himself confesses that, in addition to being a holy knight, he was also a general in the Demon King's army. Kai then stated that the country was nearing its end, because even the capital was swarming with enemies. Kai used his assessment skill and saw that Rines was a powerful warrior, an all-rounder. They faced off again, and Kai managed to dodge his sword, but then Rines used fire magic, catching Kai off guard, although he somehow dodged the attack. Kai, now on the defensive, attacked again, but then Rines, he engulfed his sword in fire and declared it was all over for Kai. Kuroka quickly pulled out his gun and shot him right in the middle of the forehead, a fatal shot that resulted in his demise. Rines fell and died. Kai didn't want to use his gun for something like that, especially since he had limited bullets, but he had no other choice. He needed to learn how to fight hand-to-hand if he wanted to survive in this world. Kansaki was shocked to see a gun and commented on how terrifying it was to know that someone in the class was carrying a weapon. He explained to her that it was just standard equipment, standard for an assassin. She thanked him, and he asked her why she hadn't used her domination power, to which she replied that, after they chained her hand with that chain, an old man entered the room. They both looked like medieval knights and princesses, wearing unusual and old-fashioned clothing. The girl greeted the students, saying that she somehow couldn't use her powers anymore. As they were leaving, she told him that those guys were trying to attack everyone in his class, but he already knew that from his interrogation. To the 4th guy he had captured previously. The 4th guy told him that they had orders to kill all the hero candidates, and that he was the one who informed him, told him about Kansaki's location. They intended to use her as a hostage while attacking the others. What he couldn't understand was the fact that he wasn't killed by the death curse, like what happened to Steri. This meant that a demon hadn't done this. Instead, some humans were against them. It was almost morning when Suji found them, and he was glad to see her. Kille told her everything about the Demon King cult, and how humans were also working against humanity. The problem now was that they couldn't easily tell which humans were their enemies, unlike with monsters. This meant that everyone needed to be more cautious, and they decided not to tell Leonora, since he would simply tell them to handle it themselves, so they ended up deciding to gather everyone to decide on a course of action. As they were talking, suddenly, smoke spread around them, and they were soon surrounded by even more cult members. Everyone prepared to fight, not only against these 3, but also against all the other candidate groups. They were also cornered by the men. Kai noticed that there were 6 of them, and their stats were obviously lower than Rina's, but they were strong. Without wasting any time, the 6 men jumped towards them. Kansaki used his powers to stop them, and Kai pierced their heads with sharp knives, killing them instantly. Impressive, and called them hero candidates. The students were surprised to see them. Kai analyzed both of them and concluded that the man had the physique of a sword user, and Suji was a little stressed seeing that they were all humans. After all, Suji tried to debate the matter, but Kai silenced him, saying that they were enemies. At the end of the day, the remaining cult member attacked Suji, and Suji tried to reason with him, but the cult members insisted he was only serving his master. Kansaki was prepared to use her powers again, but Kai stopped her, saying he wanted Suji to kill the man. Suji broke the man's sword and asked him to surrender if he wanted to live, but the man was too stubborn and attacked. Suji injured his hand in a counterattack, which resulted in Suji cutting his body. The man was groaning, and Suji wanted to leave him there to die, but Kai told him to eliminate him right then and there, otherwise he could pose a threat. Suji was reluctant but ended up doing exactly as Kai instructed. Meanwhile, Arasi and his henchmen also defeated all the men. The last man was mercilessly killed by Arasi's power. Rina and the others found it difficult to kill humans. With the exception of Rina, the other girls were being injured. Suddenly, Leonora appeared on the scene and asked if she should provide them with the proof. The men became even angrier upon seeing Leonora, and she retorted that since they were her candidates, it was only natural that she would come to their aid when they were in danger. One of the men then said that she didn't even have her knight with her, so how would she manage? She mocked them, saying that they were just a group of amateurs seduced by the Demon King, and that she didn't even consider them enemies. This provoked all the men to attack her at once, but she simultaneously used her power of domination to pin them all to the ground. Hated and bullied him because of his antisocial personality and strange aura. But everything changed one day, when our protagonist and his classmates were suddenly transferred to, also had his guard up, and as for the girl, he sensed slight muscles, but she seemed quite normal to him. The girl introduced herself as Leonora, the Archbishop of the Holy Country, and the men were immobilized, and Rina remarked that her powers were similar to Kansaki's, but Leonora requested that she not compare her powers to something like his domination, as her ability was superior in every aspect, from range to power. Rina asked her why she had saved him, and she replied that she had mentioned something about giving him a passing grade. They all thanked her for protecting them, and one of the men clutched at her dress, begging her not to ignore them. He asked what she intended to do with them. The girl looked down and apologized to the man for still being alive. Then, she used her power of domination on all the candidates, ordering them to kill the men lying on the ground. Their bodies began to move on their own, and they all killed the men against their will. Such was the power of Leonora, making it impossible for the hero candidates to control their own bodies. Ki and Kansaki watched everything unfold from far away, and Kansaki was surprised to see her capable of controlling so many people at once. It was clear that his reach and power were on a completely different level. 12 hours after the attack, all the candidates gathered again, in the marketed lounge. Many of them were in pretty bad shape. Narumi, shocked, said she wouldn't let her get away with it, since she made all the candidates kill people against their will. Suji blamed himself for not arriving sooner, but Kei explained that it wouldn't have made any difference, since none of them were strong enough to resist Leonora's power. Kai knew for sure that, with the demon army general defeated, they wouldn't be able to make any moves for a while. Then he asked Kansaki to. Accompanying her was Gaius, a knight and her protector. Arasi told her that he had never heard of the girl or that country, and asked if she was messing with them. Accompany him. She asked what the purpose was, and he told her that, in order to find a way to deal with Leonora's domination magic, he needed the help of someone who had powers similar to hers, and asked her to be dominated by her powers. Hearing this, the girl immediately became nervous. Following this, we are told that on the day after the cult members were repelled, the kingdom held a massive parade to celebrate the summoning of the hero candidates. This served as proof that the hero candidates had demonstrated their power during their battle against the Demon King's cult. Everyone was welcomed with open arms by the citizens of the royal capital. When all the Dages candidates had gathered, Leonora told them that she would like them to return to Temple City. Kei explained to the others that this was the name of the city where they were summoned, and that he believed it was under Leonora's control. Suji asked Leonora if she wouldn't be coming with them as well. She responded that she still had some matters to attend to, so she would be leaving them. Everyone under Gallus's care. Rina said she wished she could return, but her dormitories had been burned down. Rina noticed that one of the girls seemed quite distracted and couldn't even answer the questions they asked her. Simply put, you could clearly see in her eyes that she was far too afraid of Leonora. We can tell this because when Leonora approached her, the girl jumped in fear. After this, Leonora left with a smile, and all the candidates harbored resentment towards her. Soon, Gallus informs all the candidates that they will depart for their destination at that very moment. At night, everyone camped, and Arasi and the others once again ventured into the forest. Kansaki asked Kai if they were really. The girl responded that she certainly wasn't messing with them. Suji stepped forward and explained that they had suddenly found themselves there and were, therefore, a little nervous, going to do it that night, and he replied that Leonora wasn't there and that all the soldiers were weak, and therefore it was the best opportunity to kill Gallus. Under these conditions, there was no reason for him to stop them and simply enjoy the show. Meanwhile, Narumi had taken Gaius deep into the forest, claiming to have spotted a monster giant. Gaius only followed because the road led to the royal capital, and a monster lurking there posed a danger. Suddenly, Arasi ambushed Gaius from behind, attacking with full force. Gaius wasn't expecting the attack, so he took the hit and started bleeding. Seeing that he was still alive, Arachi was a little surprised, since not even her best attack could kill him. The attack was quite effective, causing Gaius to lose his footing and suddenly step on a landmine, which exploded. Arachi smiled and revealed that everything was a trap set specifically for him. Gaius then used mana to defend himself, but he was still seriously injured. He expressed his disappointment, saying he hadn't expected Arachi to ambush him in this way. Suddenly, all the other members of Arachi's group surrounded the old man. Seeing the seriousness of the situation, Gaius threw a ball of light up into the sky, which acted like fireworks. Kai, who was far away, saw this, and commented that Arachi had ruined their plan because the ball of light was a distress signal, and the soldiers had seen it and were heading in that direction. However, they were unable to reach the location because Kai stood in their way and killed them all. Meanwhile, the candidates were beating Gaius, who could barely keep up with them. The pace was too much, and his powers were soon overwhelmed to the point that he couldn't defend himself in time, resulting in the loss of his only arm, and he was covered in blood. The girl began to explain everything to them, so that they could understand why they were there. She began by saying that they were summoned to a parallel world as the hope of humanity. Arachi congratulated him, saying that he was tough for his age. Narumi told him about the distress signal and said that she was trying to buy some time, but Gaius replied that there was no more time left. The need for that. Just then, Leonore entered with her usual smile, mentioning that Gaius was quite cornered. This was rather unexpected, and the candidates were surprised to see her. At the same time, Suji, Reina, and the other candidates saw Kansaki using her domination power to tie up some soldiers. She told them she was following orders, but they didn't believe her, since they knew she wasn't the type to follow anyone's orders. Kei then entered and told them that she was following his orders, which surprised Suji. However, what surprised her the most was hearing that Kei had killed the guards. Kei explained that Arachi already had her hands full fighting Gaius, so he took care of the guards himself. Suji and the others understood the whole situation. Suji then asked if he would join Arachi, to which he replied that he was only doing what he wanted to do. Kei told her that she should look for Arachi instead of bothering him. He does have a point, and Suji and the others went to search for Arachi and her group. Leonora told Gaius that he was losing, and he accepted it, saying that, after all, he couldn't fight his old age. Arachi stated that, after everything that had happened, she wasn't going to back down, tuck her tail between her legs, and run away. One of the candidates asked her if she was the one controlling them. Leonora responded to this by saying that there were other conditions that had to be met. If they had a large mana reserve to resist, it wouldn't be as effective. For those who always relied on their powers and weren't used to controlling their mana, it was easy for her to control them all. To defeat the evil Demon King, they were the candidates to be heroes of the parallel world. It was difficult for the students to believe that something like this was happening to them. Arachi called her a coward and challenged her, saying she wouldn't be able to fight them head-on. She smiled and said that she would take care of them herself, adding that she would break their fangs without to waste time. Now, he jumped towards her. She quickly summoned a large piece of rock and sent it flying. Then, he manipulated other elements like fire, water, and air to defeat the others. Candidates. Narumi arrived, picked up Arachi, and flew into the sky. Suddenly, Suji and the other candidates also arrived, telling Arachi to stop the fight and asking what he would gain from it. Arachi told him to stop him by force if he wanted to, because he hated their pacifistic methods. Suji asked the others if they felt the same way, and Rina stood up and said that she supported Arachi. Leonora laughed and said that they were still fighting amongst themselves. She added that at that moment, they were responsible for starting a rebellion, and then asked if they expected her to forgive them. Even if they stopped the rebellion right now, she wouldn't forgive them, because they would have to take responsibility for starting a rebellion, Leonora conjured. A huge cyclone struck, injuring everyone. Suji was tense, seeing everyone hurt, but Arachi told him to calm down, saying that if he wanted to protect everyone, then he would have to resolve the situation himself, or else everyone would die. Suji understood the situation, and since there was no other way, he prepared to fight. Following his lead, Rina and the others did as well. Leonora said she would show them the difference between herself and them. Meanwhile, not far away, Kansaki asked Kai what they should do. He told her that once Leonora used her magic to enslave them, then he would join the fight. Until then, they should trust the other candidates. At the same time, we see how the candidates were already ready to. Gaius told Arachi to watch his mouth while speaking to the country's saint. Arachi was unfazed by this, which caused Gaius to draw his sword. But before he could commit an action, fight, Gaius managed to get up and said that he was weak, but that he still wanted to fight for her sake. Because of his loyalty, Leonora healed all of his wounds, including his arm, and it could be said that he was fully recovered. Who never stops fighting. The candidates were scared because they had done so much to corner Gaius, but now he was back again. Rena told him not to worry, because their numbers had increased, which compensated for his strength. Leonora told them that they could attack her at any time because she considered this battle a test for them. He added that if they couldn't beat him, then they couldn't become heroes. Soon the fight began, and Gaius noticed that it was difficult to fight Suji with her magic sword. For her part, Leonora used water magic to attack Sui, but Rena nullified it, although he was still injured by the attack nonetheless. Everyone quickly attacked Leonora, but none of the attacks could even touch her. Meanwhile, Clay was hiding in the shadows and used his appraisal skill to check Leonora's stats, noticing that although she was a powerful mage, her defense was weak. A good physical attack would have been enough, but it would be a bit difficult because Gaius was in the way. So, he asked Suji to entrust Gaius to him and go defeat Leonora. However, Suji, he had a problem. His magic couldn't affect her. Then, one of the candidates gave him a steel sword, and Leonora commented that he now looked ready for combat. The other candidates couldn't help Suji because their powers wouldn't work on her, and they couldn't help Arasi either, since he was engaged in close combat. Arasi, with his short reach, was able to go toe-to-toe with Gaius, because even though the old man was healed, his stamina was still low. However, Arasi also couldn't use his explosive power, which put them in. Nonsense, Leonora reassured him. Arasi jumped on the old man, and Kai was surprised by her bravery. Before Arasi could launch an attack, Gaius threw his sword and made a small cut. The same situation. On the other side of the fight, Leonora was using ranged attacks against Suji to prevent her from closing in with her sword. Suji thought there had to be something, what he could do to get close and defeat her, but he didn't know what that was. Leonora smiled and said it was to be expected of Suji, since very few people in the country were capable of doing it, dodging their attacks. It was still a one-sided battle, since he wasn't close enough to her and he couldn't even rely on the other candidates. Suji rushed towards her, at full speed, and negated her wind attacks. She also used ground and fire attacks, but he dodged them all. Then he realized that he was unconsciously using magic like armor, which meant that he was growing at such a rapid pace. She was a little afraid of him, but managed to shake it off with her powers. Meanwhile, Arasi could no longer trust her powers, and wondered what she could do to defeat Gaius. Because she was lost in thought, Gaius cut her abdomen with a single blow. Arasi was angry with himself for failing to defeat an old man. He knelt on the ground, and Gaius told him that he could only go so far without his powers. At that moment, Arasi remembered that even without his powers, he was destined to be strong. He then struck the old man so hard that he fell to the ground, knocked out and bleeding, securing Arasi's victory. Meanwhile, Suji thought that she had to win, or her friends would suffer. With this in mind, he stood up, and a menacing aura surrounded him. Leonora noticed his amazing resilience, but she was quite relaxed because she believed he couldn't get close to her. However, she was wrong, because in the blink of an eye, Suji was right in front of her and managed to cut her hand. In his head, his attack was so fast that no one even saw it. Leonora apologized for her aggression and said that she would explain everything in detail, but for that, everyone had to be quiet. This was something she did not expect and, in her opinion, was impossible. But she didn't have time to think, as Suji was now right behind her. She managed to use the powers of water to get away, somehow. The girl realized that she had gained instantaneous movement. With this advantage, the boy used his new power again, and was only a dumb centimeter away from slicing his neck when she suddenly ordered him to kneel. He couldn't move. She smiled and said that she hadn't wanted to use it, but she had no other choice. Kai noticed that he had finally used his trump card and told Kensaki that it was time to move. Leonora smiled and said that she hadn't expected to use enslaving magic, but Suji had forced her hand. Thanks to her enslaving magic, Suji lay at her feet like a statue. The other candidates quickly rushed to save Suji, but Leonora ordered them not to move, and they all stopped halfway. Leonora said that they had all done a good job, and that, therefore, she would give them a passing grade. She added that she hadn't expected that. Lost Gallos, but after all, he was just a knight, and could be replaced. Besides, as long as she could control the others, it wouldn't be a problem. In such a situation, the candidates were losing hope, and if they didn't have any countermeasures, they would lose without a fight. She told everyone that the reason they were allowed to summon the candidates was so that, when the time came, she could freely control them. Otherwise, they would become threats. Suddenly, 3 knives attacked her from behind, but she easily dodged them and said she knew he had been hiding the whole time. It was Kai, and he responded that he was surprised she paid attention to someone and listened to her. Her demeanor suddenly changed from calm to scary. She explained that, due to the Demon King's invasion, the humanity of this world was facing, as common as him. Leonora said that, from the beginning, she had a strange feeling about him. She said she was disappointed in him because she didn't expect him to resort to a lost battle like that. She commanded him not to move, and he was also under her spell. She was in the middle of explaining her magic when, suddenly, a bullet struck her shoulder. Leonora was shocked. Seeing that he could still move and shoot even while under her spell, she asked him how he was able to do it, as she was certain that she was using her magic on him and had no intention of releasing him. Without much explanation, he shot her again, this time in the abdomen, and she couldn't understand what kind of weapon it was, since weapons didn't exist in her world, and her defenses couldn't keep up. He explained to her that it was a weapon that could kill anyone in his world, and he also told her that he didn't have many bullets and didn't want to waste them. Annoyed, she unleashed her firepower, but only her robe was hit by the fire, and she was no longer there. The next second, he was standing directly behind her, with his weapon pointed at her head. He stated that he knew she wasn't a good close-range fighter, and that her magic, enslaving magic, does not work against him. She was shocked, and doesn't understand why Kai can nullify her magic. To achieve this, Kai had made a risky move, but in the end, he was able to win the bet. The reason why he was able to achieve all this was Kansaki. That night, when he asked Kansaki to dominate him, he explained that the ability that was cast first would take priority over the newly cast ability. This meant that if she used her power of domination on him first, then he would negate the enslaving magic. And since the candidates had divine protection, their powers had to be superior to magic. Kansaki was doubtful, as his ability was weaker than Leonora's magic. Kai, extinction. Their country, the sacred nation, continued to resist, but they no longer have the power to completely stop the invasion. Kai was surprised by this, and thought that explains that there is a chance, since the same thing happened with Steri. At that time, the girl had used her domination magic on the monsters, but because Stadia had casting her spell before she could regain control over her monsters was quite a risky gamble, but they had no other choice at that moment. Leonora realized that Kansaki was the reason her magic wasn't working on Kai, and she was right, since Kai was under Kansaki's spell. This cheap trick bothered the saint quite a bit, but regardless, Kai told her that it was the end for him, and that if she tried anything strange, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. Thanks to our boy's cunning, Leonora was captured and handcuffed. The handcuffs sealed her magical power, and these were the same handcuffs that had previously been used on Kansaki. Leonora asked Kai what he planned to do with her, to which Kai replied that the demand was simple. If she sent them back, then they would release her. She apologized, saying it was impossible for her, since all he had to do was invoke magic, but sending them back required a different kind of magic. Kai knew she wasn't lying, because she didn't have the necessary skills to send them back. He then asked her how he was supposed to send them back after they defeated the Demon King. She explained that the invocation required an immense amount of energy, so did they rely on their god to summon them? In other words, it was God who had summoned them. Once they defeated the Demon King, God himself would send them back. However, she seemed unsure of her statement because no previous candidate had ever been sent back, as they were all killed by the Demon King. Another world, a world of swords and magic. A mysterious messenger announced to everyone that they were heroes summoned to this world to defeat the Demon King, and for such a daunting task, story was quite common. The girl continued, saying that they were humanity's last hope, those currently considered the hero candidates. Hearing this, there's a possibility that there were some survivors, but they disappeared. After a brief conversation, Kai was ready to kill her, but Suji stopped him. Suji told him that she was cooperating only because he thought Leonora could send them back, but since she couldn't, he wanted to maintain his status as a hero candidate because he didn't want to become a traitor in that world at the moment. Kai asked if they were no longer traitors, and Leonora assured him that she would pretend nothing had happened that night. Sugi said that the crime of killing a saint was serious and could cause them a lot of problems. Therefore, the other candidates also agreed with him. Naruni was still on Kai's side because, since they were in such a situation, it was better that they eliminate her. Suji agreed that killing her was the most sensible thing to do, but what would they do after killing her? Kai understood Suji's point of view, but in an unexpected turn of events, he shot Leonora right between the eyes. Everyone was shocked to see Leonora's body fall to the ground, and Kai used his smoke grenade and disappeared from there. The candidates were upset. They were clearly not happy with his decision and actions. Kansaki realized that it all boiled down to what he had previously planned with her a few hours ago. When Kei and Kansaki were planning, he told her that the primary goal was to capture Leonora and find a way to return home, but if that proved impossible, he would kill her. He knew that if he captured her and they couldn't return to their world, Suji would try to protect her. At that point, he would kill her and flee. He was planning to bear the sin of killing the saint. He simply stated that was the reason he left some of his guards alive, so they could place the blame on him. He told them to put all the blame on him and return to the Empire. She didn't. The students responded that they couldn't do this, as they had never fought before. Being in this situation, things become a little tedious, causing some of them to. She wasn't sure she could do it, but he assured her that she could, and that she could even use her powers during the negotiation to ensure everything worked out. She asked him where he would flee to, and he told her that he wouldn't worry about him. Meanwhile, far away in a dark castle, a man was reporting on his failed attempt to assassinate the Demon King's hero candidates. The king told him not to worry, because the hero candidates would definitely appear on the front lines in the end. The game was becoming interesting, and the Demon King was enjoying it. 2 days after the incident, Kaye was living in the woods. He was near a city, but it would take him half a day to reach it on foot, since there was no way he would be allowed entry after killing the saint. He decided to sneak in at night. He needed to earn some money and spotted a tavern. Inside, the tavern had a lively atmosphere, and someone asked him where he was from. He lied, saying he was from a nearby village and was now looking for work. The man advised him to become an adventurer. He would have to accept jobs from the guild, and they would pay him for it. He was also told that the guild was in dire need of new adventurers, so they didn't even require identification. He stayed at an inn, and fortunately, no one there recognized him. Then he went to the guild in that town and saw all sorts of people. He went to the reception desk and registered. They asked him about his name, age, and origin, so he used his alias, Sidon, and lied, saying that the Demon King's army had destroyed his city. Sidon was the Kudur 4, same codename he used in the real world. The receptionist also explained how the guild system worked. There were ranks from A to F. The higher the rank, the greater the. The girls start to cry. Gaius said that it might sound impossible, but they would have to try, since there was no way to return to their own world unless they defeated the Demon King. Reward, and since he was new, he was registered as an F-rank adventurer. After this, our protagonist went to the bulletin board to take on his first task, and soon 3 guys approached him, bother him. Seeing the type of mission he chose, they mocked him, and really didn't like that the brat had chosen that task. They thought it was impossible for that brat could complete that task. Kai was surrounded by some adventurers who asked him not to take the mission. Kai calmly turned around, thanked them for the warning, and asked them to leave him alone. Hearing this, the boys became frustrated, thinking Kai was very conceited. Seeing him surrounded, people murmured that those guys were looking to pick a fight with a rookie. Again, one of the boys tried to attack Kai, shouting that Kai needed a lesson, but to his surprise, Kai blocked the attack and quickly grabbed his hand. The boy was surprised and yelled at Kai to let go of his hand. Kai calmly released him because he didn't want any trouble. However, the boy told his companions to attack Kai together and teach him a lesson. They all tried to attack him at once, but Kos easily defeated him and quietly left the guild. As he departed, he mused to himself that he now at least understood the average skill level of the adventurers in the guild. Compared to the hero candidates, they were surprisingly weak, so he resolved to complete the mission as swiftly as possible. The scene then shifted to the forest, where Kai was thinking that, based on the mission intel, the kobolds should be in the vicinity. Suddenly, he spotted animal tracks on the ground. Arajikai tracked them, and as he advanced, he sensed that he was surrounded, and there was more than one presence. Arajikai also observed that the mysterious creatures were quite skilled at concealing themselves, leading him to suspect that the students were even more surprised upon hearing this. Kai knew he only said that to motivate them. He thought that people who had they were kobolds. Out of nowhere, a kobold materialized from behind and launched a surprise attack, but Kai sensed it and easily evaded it. Our boy noticed that these kobolds were wielding a human sword in their hand, meaning they had likely defeated an adventurer. As he was thinking, another kobold approached from behind, attempting to attack. This time, Kai dodged the attack and scooped up a degrowling adventurer, bit of dust from the ground, throwing it into the second kobold's eyes. While the second kobold was blinded, Kai punched the first kobold in the face. As it fell to the ground, Kai grabbed the sword and quickly finished it off. Seeing this, the second kobold was shocked, but before it could react, Kai attacked and swiftly eliminated it with a knife. Kai then used his skill of appraisal to check the kobold's statistics and realized that these creatures posed no real threat to him. Feeling confident, he decided he could easily hunt them, easily to earn more money. After a while, the scene shifted to the guild, where everyone was staring at Arajikai in shock. Arajikai had brought kobold ears as proof of his subjugation and asked the receptionist if it was enough to cover the fee. She responded affirmatively, then asked if he was certain he had really done it all by himself. Kai responded with explaining that hunting kobolds was actually very easy, but locating them had been the most challenging part. He reflected on how, even though he possessed the skill to fight them, he still lacked his exploration ability. Seeing Kai return after defeating the kobolds, the people around him were surprised and began asking if hunting kobolds was really such an easy feat. Easy. At one point, they even went so far as to speculate that Kai might actually be a C-rank hunter from somewhere else entirely, but someone who was present mentioned, lived in peace, couldn't suddenly start killing, so they needed experience for that, and above all, talent. Arasi stood up with blood on his head and cursed them for that they had heard that Kairagi was still just a rookie. The receptionist, Mia, interrupted the conversation, asking Kairagi to wait for a moment while she went inside to prepare his reward. The scene then shifted to nighttime, where Kai was walking somewhere, counting his money. He wondered if he could earn enough by hunting those weak magical beasts. He realized that, for the time being, securing funds for his livelihood was more important, so he decided to stay in the city and earn money as an adventurer. Arajikai figured that building a network around the guild would help him gather information more easily. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of Kai. Upon seeing this person, Kai asked if they had some business with him. Our boy didn't think this person seemed much stronger than those he had fought at the guild. The guy introduced himself as Lyle, a B-rank adventurer and the person in charge of the city's branch of the guild. Our boy honestly didn't care much about this and responded in a casual tone. Then, Lile asked Arjikai if he was the same person who he had caused trouble for his men at the guild earlier that day. Arajikai responded by stating that those boys were the ones who initiated the altercation. In response, Lile angrily yelled at Arajikai, demanding he not lie, as he had heard that an unknown rookie had beaten up his men. Arajikai then admitted that yes, he was the one who had hit them. Upon hearing this, Lyle shouted that if that was the case, he would not hesitate to teach Arajikai a lesson. Lyle then attempted to strike Arajikai several times, but much to his frustration, Arajikai easily dodged all of the attacks. Finally, growing bored, Arajikai used his legs to trip Lile, causing him to fall to the ground, upon forcing them to fight when they were the ones who brought him here. He added that he hated people like them. Gaius noticed that Arasi's spirit was still intact and wondered if he could. Lila was stunned and exclaimed in pain. Arajikai then commented to Lile that his speed was impressive but unrefined, and that his movements were too large, inadvertently causing him to leave openings. Hearing this, Lyle flew into a rage and tried to attack again, demanding to know what he had said. Araji once again blocked his attack by grabbing his hand and then quickly threw him to the ground. Our boy explained that he believed Lile wasn't used to fighting humans, because their missions usually involved magical beasts. In response, Lila angrily asked why, if Araji Kai possessed so much power, he had attacked his men. Kai responded that he had already explained that it was a misunderstanding and offered to clarify everything from the beginning. Sometime later, the scene shifted to the guild, where Lili apologized to Araji Kai, admitting that it was his fault. Lili even scolded and punished his own men for lying to him, acknowledging that it was his fault for not questioning their words. He yelled at his men, demanded that they apologize to Arajikai. They apologized to Arajikai reluctantly. After Lee insisted, Arajikai replied that as long as they resolved the misunderstanding, he didn't care. Then he mentioned that he had a question to ask him. Lil apologized again and assured Arajikai that he would gladly answer any questions that he had. Arajikai then explained that he was a traveler and had registered as an adventurer to earn funds for his travels. He continued by mentioning that he had another reason for registering as an adventurer, and the curious Lila asked Arajikai what he wanted, considering his formidable power and his unknown circumstances. To be a useful warrior, Geu held his sword and decided to kill Arasi, since he might cause them trouble. But before he could do anything, he saw that Leonora was healing Arasi's wound, and explained that the power she was using was called the System, which was granted to her by her gods, and she simplified the explanation for them. She said that it was like magic, and that thanks to it, momentarily, Arajikai responded that he was looking for a way to travel to another world. Hearing this, Lyle and his men were shocked and asked him to clarify. They wondered if such a thing was possible. One of them speculated that he'd heard the hero candidates came from another world. Arajikai confirmed that he was, in fact, talking about finding a method to enter the world of those hero candidates. Lyle responded, speculating that, if that were the case, It probably involved magic, and they themselves weren't particularly familiar with it. With magic, Araji-kai acknowledged that such information wouldn't be easy to obtain and expressed his hope that Lili and his group might have some clues. Lili responded that there was possibly only one person who could provide clues, and this person was the sage Elvana. Araji-kai asked, confused, who this sage was. Lyle was surprised and asked Araji-kai how he didn't know, explaining that the sage was an elf whose advice had helped many countries. Upon hearing this, Araji-kai thought he had heard about the sage somewhere and asked if it was true. Kai then remembered reading about an elven sage in books before. It is known that the elves lived deep within the forests. Deep in the forests. He explained that elves were now rare, and with their stories being considered legends, they rarely left their forests to explore the outside world. Araji-kai concluded that the elf, who ventured out of their forest and gained wisdom, became known as a sage. He added that he had heard that the sage had been alive for more than 100 years, and was famous for possessing great wisdom and knowledge. Leela also mentioned that the sage was a renowned spellcaster with extensive knowledge of spells to cause a new phenomenon to occur in their world. Kai noted that he knew their culture and wondered if they had previously summoned people from his world as well. He walked towards Suji while saying that this power was the reason he summoned them. There, he raised his hands, and Suji's wrist began to glow. Soon, he had a sword made of light in his hand. Furthermore, he explained. Hearing this, Kai wondered if elves were known for their strong affinity with spirits, which helped them master magic. Kai also considered that even if there was no specific magic to send the heroes back to their home world, perhaps they could achieve it with spells. Lyle's subordinate, Roka, interrupted, asking if the sage was still alive, mentioning that he had never heard of the sage, nor had anyone ever seen him. Lyle acknowledged that his subordinate was right, laughed, and replied that he did not have information about that. He then apologized to Kai for not providing any useful information. Araji-kai assured him that the information was useful enough for him. Kai then mentioned that it was getting late, so he was heading back to the inn. Upon hearing this, El expressed his curiosity and asked Araji-kai what he planned to do after discovering a way to travel to another world. Araji-kai smiled and cryptically replied that he would leave that to their imagination. Confused, they watched as Araji-kai departed for the inn. Then the scene shifted to a week later at the guild, where Mia was giving Araji-kai his reward for completing the quest. After Araji-kai took his reward, he left. Outside the guild, Araji-kai reflected on how a week had already passed since the incident with Lile and her group, and during that time, he had managed to save some money. Suddenly, Lil and her subordinate approached Kai, asking if his quest had been completed, and suggesting they go out for a drink together. Kai responded with a strange and somewhat sad look, and rejected their invitation. Seeing this, El commented that Kai was very boring, and they said goodbye. As he walked on, Kai reflected on that they could wield the power of the system and awaken their innate divine protection abilities. He said that he knew that he had a selfish request, since he had called them all there, and how he had finally gathered some information about the sage. He managed to learn with certainty that the sage's name was Bonneret, and that, approximately a decade ago, Bonneret had served as country advisor. Now retired, Banneret was rumored to live near the western border, where the country was at war with the Demon King's army. Tragic, and then concluded that there was no reason for him to remain in the city any longer, so he resolved to visit the so-called wise man. The scene then shifted to the city, from the sacred Alpha Temple, where the hero candidates were in a meeting with Heinrich, the captain of the Holy Knights. The 8th Knight Corps mentioned that it had been a month since he assumed responsibility for overseeing the hero candidates, taking over the duties of the Holy Fall. So the captain inquired whether Suji had any complaints thus far. Suji replied in the negative, stating that everything was fine because she, as captain, was doing a good job. The captain expressed his happiness upon hearing those words conveyed that the hero candidates were valuable assets to the country, and he treated them with respect. Asimoto thanked the captain for his consideration. She herself thought that the captain was clearly different from Leonora. Despite this, she couldn't help but feel something suspicious about the situation. Heinrich then directed them to concentrate on the doxa main topic, mentioning that it had been decided during the previous day's meeting to mobilize the hero candidates. Suji was surprised and asked if that meant they were being sent to the front lines. Heinrich answered yes, confirming that the hero candidates were indeed being sent to the. He stated that this power was the reason he summoned them all. There, he raised his hands, and Suji's wrist began to glow, and soon he had a sword made of light in his hand. Furthermore, he explained, front lines. He explained that there were still ongoing battles on the western border. The captain then showed them a map and explained that they would be mobilized, even be me, strong on the front line. Suji replied that she understood and was about to ask about the promise, but the captain interrupted, stating that he would keep his promise to protect those who were not fit for battle. Suji gratefully thanked the captain for ensuring their safety. Heinrich then explained that, in the meantime, he would assign them some tasks, emphasizing the need for everyone to contribute in order to earn their keep. Suji agreed, seeing the practical benefits of having worked. In the morning, he also asked Suji to inform everyone and ensure they were prepared for the journey. After leaving the room as Suji and Asamoto headed back, Asamoto expressed his relief that Heinrich had accepted his request. Suji agreed and admitted that she had initially been worried about his demands, as she felt they were excessive, but she was glad that everything would have worked out. In the end, Asamoto speculated that the knights lacked the confidence to manage the hero candidates without Leonora, which could explain their reserved behavior. Suji agreed, pointing out that without Leonora, the knights would be on high alert. Asamoto then wondered about Arajikai, pondering where he had gone and what he was currently doing. At the moment, the scene then shifted to the past, depicting when Leonora was killed and Arajikai abandoned the hero candidates. The bishop tensely inquired, who could have killed Leonora? Nagashi responded that Arajikai was the culprit, revealing that he was one of the hero candidates himself. Upon hearing this, the bishop and his guards were shocked, and they were granted superpowers. And Arajikai, of course, received the most powerful ability of them all. If you want to know what it is, then let's start this story from the beginning and get to the bottom of everything. That they could wield the power of the system and awaken their innate divine protection abilities. He said that he knew he had a selfish request, since he called them all there, and the bishop quickly and urgently asked about Arajikai's whereabouts. Nagashi replied that Arajikai had escaped, noting that he was surprisingly fast for a traitor. Hearing this, the guards began arguing amongst themselves, debating whether they should immediately dispatch an inquisitor if Arajikai's betrayal was confirmed, or whether they should first verify if Saint Leonora had truly been murdered. The bishop expressed his doubts about all of this, stating that the story sounded too convenient. Now he asked, furiously demanding that the bishop clarify what he had just implied. The bishop responded, clarifying that he didn't want to deny the story outright, but there was a possibility that all the hero candidates had conspired together to eliminate Leonora. At that moment, Suji visibly tensed up, surprising everyone. Leonora's knight stepped forward and explained that he had witnessed the incident firsthand, revealing that Suji and the others present had, in fact, been trying to protect the saint, but they were overwhelmed by Kalo, who caused Leonora's death. The other knight corroborated the account, which led the bishop to say that he would believe it if his own knights were confirming the story. They were confirming the story. He inquired about Kei's strength, asking if he truly was as formidable as they said. Suji confirmed this, explaining that Arajikai had been concealing his real power all along. The bishop then invited them to have a more in-depth conversation in his private chamber and asked one of the hero candidates to join him. Unbeknownst to them, knowing it, Kansaki was secretly eavesdropping from behind a wall, using his abilities. Suji felt relieved that they had managed to resolve the situation thanks to the now they couldn't leave, and he asked them to lend him their powers. Suji said that no matter how much power they were given, they still wouldn't be able to fight right away. She responded that, in fact, they would be trained. Help of Kansaki. The scene then cuts back to the present, where Asamoto asked Suji if he was still worried about Arajikai. Suggesting that there was no need to worry, Suji smiled. He outwardly agreed, but admitted that deep down he was worried because he knew that Arajikai had sacrificed himself for them. Suji was tense because he had decided to protect everyone. But Arajikai had taken that burden upon himself, leaving Suji feeling helpless that he couldn't help Kai in the room. Suji gathered everyone together and announced that they had been ordered to mobilize to the front line. He instructed all combat-ready personnel to prepare to depart the next day. In the morning, some of the guys became tense as the reality of facing a real battle hit them. Nagashi approached them and commented that it was too late to be afraid, reminding them that they had voluntarily chosen to join the combat group. He asked them if they were the only ones being sent to the front line. Sugi replied that they would be sent along with the 8th Night Corps, under the command of Captain Kansaki. Kansaki asked Suji if there was any news regarding Arajikai. Suji explained that the temple had placed a bounty on Kai's head and had deployed a significant number of personnel to track him down. He added that there had been no news regarding Arajikai's whereabouts. Hearing this, Kansaki became visibly saddened, prompting Suji to almost offer her comfort, but before he could, Nagashi angrily shouted that she didn't care if Kai was a traitor or not. If she found him, she would burn him to ashes. Kansaki felt deeply upset and wondered why Arajikai hadn't taken her with him. The scene then shifted to the jungle, where and during their training, they would be taken care of. Suji took control of the situation and told her classmates that she knew they were afraid, but the first thing the hero and knight candidates were traveling along with the guards. As they moved forward, Sanook sensed something and stopped. At that moment, Shiori also shouted that she was tired and asked if they could take a break, but Asimoto replied that they only had a lunch break, so it wasn't possible, and it seemed they would be walking until dark. Some of the boys were wondering if anything would happen, considering they had been walking for the last 2 days without incident, and now, all of a sudden, he was asking everyone to stop. The hero candidates ask if something is wrong, and Arisi replies that he can sense the presence of a magical beast lurking behind the bushes. Just then, a knight arrives and shouts at the knight shouts at the hero candidates, demanding to know why they suddenly stopped. Suji explains that they sensed the presence of a magical beast nearby. The knight yells that he doesn't see anything and reminds them that they must follow his orders and can't do anything without his permission. Seeing and hearing how the guard was addressing them, Arasi became furious, grabbed the knight by the neck, and demands to know what he said. The knight, scared and tense, asks Arasi what he is doing. Even Suji urges Arasi to stop, as this could get them into trouble. Arasi angrily shouts, questioning why he should follow the orders of a useless knight. Suddenly, something attacks Arasi, forcing him to release the knight in order to dodge the attack. It's a beast, magical creature with a rabbit face, but with armed hands. The guards tense up and announce that it is a sharp rabbit and urge everyone to prepare for battle. But before the guards could act, the sharp rabbits charged at them, knocking their swords down. One of the sharp rabbits glared furiously at a guard, ready to attack. But what they needed was information and protection. She told them that they should listen to them for now, and the classmates agreed with her. When Leonora saw that everyone was ready, it could harm him. A strong flame of fire emerged from nowhere and finished off the sharp rabbit. It was Arasi who used his power to defeat the beast. The guard thanks Arasi to save him, but Arasi tells the guard to step aside so he doesn't get in her way. Arasi then proceeded to easily defeat each of the sharp rabbits, one by one. Some students were shocked to see Arasi's power, as it was far more destructive than what they had witnessed before. But Arasi was not satisfied, and felt that her power was still not enough compared to Arajikai's. The scene then shifted to a moment where Arajikai had pointed a gun at Leonora. Arasi became furious upon seeing Arajikai once again. Arasi was frustrated because, from the very beginning, Arajikai had shown no fear towards him, indicating that Arajikai was definitely stronger. Arajikai's lack of reaction only reinforced this belief for Arasi. Arasi then shares that, with the explosive power he received, he thought he had become stronger, but it is very frustrating to him. Realize that Araji's call is even stronger. The scene then shifts to the present, where Suji interrupts Arasi's thoughts, asking her what's wrong, since he seemed to be in a bad mood. Arasi replies that it's nothing, and that she simply doesn't like being ordered around. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the western border of the Holy Kingdom at the Klee Fortress. Initially, Captain Amelia of the Holy Knights introduced herself as the leader of the Knight Order stationed there. The captain then asks Amelia, what happened to the watchdog? Captain Amelia responds that he died approximately a week ago. Upon hearing this, the hero candidates were slightly surprised. He extended his hands and began to give them their divine powers. Maya received telekinesis, Arai gained explosion powers, Rina received fire powers, and Yosilla received. Amelia then mentioned that she wanted to let them rest first after their long journey, but she couldn't finish her sentence because the guards interrupted, shouting that the Demon King was going to attack. Amelia cheerfully comments that, as everyone has heard, there's no time to rest, so she's counting on them. Sugi agrees and instructs each hero candidate to prepare for battle. Now, for his part, he looks very determined and ready for the upcoming fight. The guards sounded the alert, and Pao shouted that the demon army was approaching. The number of monsters was enormous, which surprised Max and made him wonder why there were so many. Then he gathers the guards to start shooting and reduce the number of monsters before they get too close. The guards begin shooting arrows, while the knights with fire abilities also launch fireballs at them. Despite all the fireballs and arrows that struck the monsters, they continued to advance, proclaiming their intention to destroy the humans. Suji was surprised to see that the monsters didn't retreat even after taking heavy hits. Amelia explained that those attacks alone wouldn't be enough to defeat the monsters easily. He cautioned the hero candidates against underestimating the monster's resilience, stressing that humans were significantly weaker in comparison. Suji anxiously asks Amelia what they should do, and Amelia tells Suji to follow Heinrich's orders and instructions. She declares that she will lead the Knights of the Fourth Order to fight the monsters. Heinrich explains that he was about to say the same thing, but some people were already down there fighting the monsters. Suji, puzzled, asks, wind powers, and others also received different and surprising powers. Leonora asked if anyone was left, and Kai raised his hand. She also gave him her powers, and he, Heinrich, who he was talking about. Nagashi tells Suji that the captain was referring to Arasi and her group, as they had gone down ahead of them. Suji was stunned, and asked the girl to. He repeated what he had just said. When the smoke cleared, they saw that the humans had come to confront them head-on. The monsters laughed at Arasi, and others mocked them as fools who had come looking for death. Arasi, for his part, responded that he didn't care if they were demons or anything else. He would simply erase the monsters from existence. The fight between them began. Inside, some monsters broke through a wall and attacked the guards. When a monster was about to strike down a guard, Suji intervened, blocking the attack with her sword. This was quite unexpected. Even the guard was surprised to see Suji. Suji then unleashed the power of her sword, and with a more powerful attack, she quickly defeated the monster. Afterwards, Suji felt confident that she could handle it. Realizing that his power continued to grow, he then shouts, telling the others that they can see this is a battle they can win, so they must fight without fear. Hearing this, every hero candidate was filled with excitement for the fight. As Ugi prepares to fight again, he reminds himself that he must not hesitate, knowing that any sign of hesitation would disturb the rest of the team, since he was their leader. He reflects on how Kai taught him the cost of his naivety. Asimoto also urges everyone to stop watching and join Suji in the fight. Nagashi begins to use his attacks, and Kansaki begins to dominate the monsters. In this way, the battle continues between the monsters and the Y. He noticed his field of vision changing, and as soon as he finished acquiring his powers, he was able to read Leonora's stats. His eye color changed to red, and Leonora informed him that hero candidates. The guards, seeing the hero candidates fighting the demons, are amazed by how they are dominating the Demon King's army. The captain, he shouts and instructs the guards to cover the hero candidates so they can push back the demons. They nodded and charged forward, engaging in a lengthy battle, until who finally defeated the Demon King's army. Amelia joyfully announces their victory, and the guards begin to celebrate. As dusk approaches, Suji remained lost in Tarantia, deep thought. However, he was interrupted by the captain, who asked if it was his first time fighting like that, and how he felt about it. Suji replies that it is challenging to learn how to manage battles on such a grand scale. He explains that during the battle, his perspective narrowed, making it difficult for him to give orders effectively. Heinrich praised Suji for his efforts, and credited the hero candidates for their role in winning the battle. However, he warned them to remain vigilant, because even though they had faced with mid-rank enemies in relatively small numbers, high-rank demons would pose a different kind of challenge due to their superior capabilities. Suji, upon hearing Heinrich's warning, Suji becomes serious and assures him that he will remember it. The scene then shifts to the demon's lair, where a monster is reporting the details of the battle to Astonga, one of the 4 heavenly kings serving in the Demon King's army. The monster apologizes for failing to fulfill his duties, which greatly angers Astonga. The scene then transitions to the Great Hishot Forest, where Arajikai was traveling. As he neared the forest's edge, he mused that his journey to visit the sage should be coming to an end soon. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, he had received the power of judgment, which was quite rare. This power would allow him to see the statistics and details of his target. Out of curiosity, he tested his powers on himself. Arajikai sensed something approaching him, and tongues lashed out, aiming to strike him. Our boy somehow managed to dodge them, but noticing their incredible speed, which led him to wonder what kind of language they were using. As he looked around more carefully, Arajikai spotted some new magical beasts, and upon scanning them, his system identified them like tongue baboons. After analyzing their stats, Arajikai concluded that they were somewhat mediocre creatures. The tongue baboons attacked Arajikai again, but our boy easily dodged their attack. However, realizing that they were rapidly closing in, Arajikai quickly displayed his agility by leaping away from the area to evade their attacks. The baboons attacked Arajikai again with their tongues, but this time Arajikai swiftly drew his knife and sliced one of the tongues in half. The tongue baboons were surprised by this move, and Arajikai continued slashing until he had severed all the tongues from their mouths. One baboon attempted to attack with its tail, but it was too slow for Arajikai, who, he dodged it easily and quickly. He defeated the creature, and upon witnessing this, the other baboons were stunned and tense, unsure of what to do. Next, Arajikaya now. Furious, he challenged them, asking if they would come to him, or if he would have to go to them and bring about their demise. Sometime later, the scene changed, with the corpses of the tongued baboons lying on the ground. Arajikai reflected that these magical beasts were powerful and seemed to be appearing little by little, which led him to wonder if it was because he was approaching the Demon King's territory, or perhaps because the forest was far from the cities where knights and adventurers lived, as he, himself, and was able to see his own statistics. Arasi also tested his powers and mocked Kai, saying that all he got was a new eye color. Kai noticed that the students were, as he ventured deeper, Arajikai thought that the further he went, the greater the chance of encountering powerful magical beasts, but he was somehow grateful. His assessment ability allowed him to detect some of these beasts, so Arajikai decided to remain alert. The scene then shifts to some time later, where Arajikai, he finally reached Mount Uranus, a natural defensive barrier that slowed down the Demon King's army's invasion. Arajikai then explains that the highest peak, high, is called Blinding Wolf Mountain, and there's a rumor that a sage lives at the summit of that mountain. He then thought that, if he remembered correctly, there should be a small village at the foot of Blinding Wolf Mountain. Arajikai arrived at the village. However, he was shocked to see the entire village in flames and wondered if it had been attacked by the Demon King's army. Demon, as Arajikai had suspected. The village had, in fact, been attacked by the Demon King's army. Monsters were standing in the village, and Arajikai was observing them from the rooftop of a house, hidden from sight. Arajikai thought that the place was supposed to be far from the front lines, so he decided to be more cautious. The monsters asked their leader, Hector, what they should do, suggesting that massacring the humans would be acceptable. Hector orders them to cease the massacre and suggests enslaving the humans instead. He then asks if they have gathered any information regarding the bond. The monster sage confirms this, stating that the sage resides at the summit of Blinding Wolf Mountain. Upon hearing this, Hector became frustrated because his information was correct, which greatly upset him. He emphasized that their highest priority was the van, also known as the sage. Hector instructed the, acting haughty and powerful. They didn't even have much information about the world yet, and their powers were borrowed and could be taken away at any moment. But monsters to rest in the village for the night, and then prepare to climb Blinding Wolf Mountain. The next day, a tense monster expresses his concern, mentioning that it is known that Reaper Wolf Mountain is the nesting ground of the Reaper Wolves, which are known to be untamable beasts. Do they believe that unless they defeat the Reaper Wolf, they won't be able to achieve their objective? The second monster inquires about the reasoning behind the first monster's statement. The first monster explains that domination magic is ineffective against magical beasts with high intelligence. Furthermore, he heard that the 4 heavenly kings had once managed to tame a dragon, but it would be impossible for him to accomplish the same feat with the Reaper Wolf. Hector also mentioned that he wasn't particularly skilled in magic, so he was talking about skills that he didn't even possess. It clearly didn't make any sense, but the only viable option remaining was to defeat the indomitable magical beast. The other monsters concurred with Hector's assessment. Upon seeing this, Arajikai concludes that the group is well organized under Hector's command, leading Kai to wonder if this organization is due to the influence of high-ranking demons. When Kai checks Hector's status, he learns that Hector is one of the few high-ranking demons within the Demon King's army. Kai realizes he understands that it would be extremely challenging to confront Hector directly in battle. Suddenly, Hector also sensed that someone was watching him, so he signaled the monster to investigate, as he felt that someone was lurking around. Kai was quite impressed to see that Hector's senses were remarkably sharp. Immediately, the monsters began searching for Arajikai. The scene opens with a man running through a dark alley. He looked visibly anxious and frightened. When he stopped, he glanced back, thinking that he remained calm because our protagonist had many other ways to kill people. After everyone received their powers, Leonora told them to get some rest for the night, but he felt relieved because he was skilled at hiding and sneaking around. As Arajikai retreated, he noticed that some humans had been captured by the monsters, and all of them were bound with ropes. Despite seeing the captured villagers, Arajikai decided not to intervene, since his main objective, just like that of the demons, was to find and meet the wise man. Aside from that, he was clear that he had to climb this mountain and become stronger than the Demon King's army. The scene changed to the highest peak of the commanded Urugano Mountain. a dangerous area also known as Blinding Wolf Mountain. The protagonist had somehow made his way up to this point. When he checked the map, it didn't show any established trails, so he decided to follow the paths used by wild beasts. He also noticed that his vision was unclear, and the ground seemed unstable. Despite being in a hurry, he opted to proceed with caution. The protagonist advanced further and felt someone's presence. The presence was close, and he thought it might be the rumored blinding wolf. Listening carefully, he discerned not one, but two presences. But three distinct sounds that gradually increased in number could be heard. The protagonist realized that, even though the wolves were hidden, their presence felt overwhelming. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he found himself completely surrounded by wolves. They were about to attack him, but he quickly jumped and climbed up a nearby tree. The protagonist was stunned as he realized the reason why so many people had disappeared on the mountain. Then, he used his appraisal skill to assess the wolves' condition. Upon checking, he found that their individual stats were average, and their main strength lay in their coordination as a pack. While the protagonist was assessing their condition, a wolf charged towards the tree and snapped it in half. The protagonist knew that he had to act quickly, so, then, the hero candidates were escorted to their personal chambers. Kai then snuck out of his window in pursuit of additional information. Outside, the guards were patrolling and discussing how the Regis. He grabbed a leaf and infused it with mana. He then used the mana-infused leaf to attack the wolves, and seconds later, one of the wolves died. After one of their own was cut in half, more wolves tried to attack the protagonist, each time using his blade to strike them down. Two more were eliminated in the same manner. Now, a pack of 6 wolves approached, preparing to attack together, so this time, the protagonist, he channeled mana into his own body, believing that a conscious effort would yield a significant effect. His reasoning stemmed from Leonora, once mentioning that those who frequently depended on divine protection possessed weak control over their mana energy. He also recalled Leonora's words, where she mentioned that those who constantly relied on the divine protection were unaccustomed to controlling mana. In her opinion, they were nothing but weaklings, which was why she could control them all, and why they couldn't resist Eleonora's enslavement. By Eleonora back then, the protagonist knew he had to improve to overcome his weakness. He believed that mastering mana control would also enhance his resistance against enemy magic. He also realized that mana wasn't as powerful as divine protection, but knew he had to learn this skill if he wanted to become stronger in this new world. The protagonist, he decided to continue fighting the wolves while simultaneously practicing mana control. While climbing the mountain, the protagonist suddenly sensed something and quickly went to investigate. He headed towards the leader of the wolves and, upon arriving, asked the wolf to confirm that he was indeed the leader. The other wolves were confused about what the protagonist was trying to do, but when the leader attempted to attack the protagonist, Arajikai quickly defended himself and defeated the wolves without hesitation. When the protagonist looked up, he noticed that as soon as he defeated their leader, all the wolves, the hero candidates, appeared weak to them. They found it amusing that those children were chosen to defeat the Demon King. One of them commented that the Saint Nose fled, which was normal considering the leader is the strongest magical beast in the group. After that, the protagonist chased after the remaining wolves alone. Suddenly, to his surprise, something special occurred. He saw a pink-colored duplicate of the wolves. Upon seeing this, the protagonist wondered if his ability allowed him to predict the trajectory of the wolves' movements. His assumption proved correct. He was, in fact, predicting the future trajectories of the wolves' attacks. Using this ability, the protagonist swiftly defeated 2 more wolves. He realized that with his ability, he could see approximately 1 second into the future. Seeing this, the remaining wolves became frightened. However, the protagonist told them not to even think about fleeing, but, instead, to join him in training for a little longer. After a while, our protagonist had eliminated all of the wolves. When he checked his own status, he discovered that his new ability, Divine Protection of Foresight, helped him to see the future movements of his enemies. Our protagonist then reflected that when he had received the detection skill, from exploiting the weak point, his appraisal skill also leveled up. This progression essentially upgrades his blessings from normal to enhanced. However, because the appraisal now allows him to see everything, as expected, our boy feels quite exhausted, so he decided to take a break. But suddenly, he sensed something and wondered if the Demon King's army had arrived. With this in mind, he abandoned his plan to rest and rushed towards the strong presence he felt. The scene changed to near the mountain peak, where the monsters had captured an elven girl. The self-proclaimed mayor, Hector, expressed his admiration for her perseverance, something to be expected from a disciple of the wise man. Then, he declared that it was the end for something they don't know. Kai listened to their entire conversation. He used his power of judgment to check the stats of one of the guards, and noticed that he only possessed swordsmanship. Soon, Hurin ordered his monsters to eliminate the elven girl. The girl was about to say something when, suddenly, she was attacked by the monster. But just when she thought it was the end for her, the protagonist arrived unexpectedly, and quickly helped her dodge the attack. He held her in his arms, and the girl was stunned to see that a human had saved her. The monsters. Confused, they asked the protagonist who he was and whether he was a new enemy. Ignoring their question, he noticed that there were a total of 10 monsters, and their leader, Hector, was a high-ranking demon. Range. The girl asked the protagonist why he had helped her, to which he responded by asking if she was the wise man's disciple. When the girl confirmed that she was a disciple of the wise man, the protagonist explained that his reason for helping her was because he had some business with him. With that said, our protagonist used his appraisal skill on the girl, and discovered that she was a half-elf. Furthermore, he discovered that she possessed the ability to cast spells within her skill set. Interrupting his thoughts, Hector commented that he didn't need to ask who the human is, since he was certain that our boy was definitely an enemy, so he orders his monsters to kill both the elf and the human. Our boy realized that, to save the girl and earn a favor from the wise man, he had to defeat those monsters. The monsters then attacked the protagonist, and with the help of his foresight ability, the protagonist attempted to predict their future movements. His foresight ability proved to be quite useful, as the protagonist was able to predict the monsters' future movements, allowing him to block their attacks effectively. The monsters were surprised, and in one swift movement, the protagonist eliminated them all with his knife. The other monsters were stunned by the monster's oath. He left in search of more information. He also learned about the city's structure, discovering it was a fortified city. He wanted to enter the inner castle, but the doors scene they had just witnessed. The protagonist, for his part, reflected that as long as foresight is active during hand-to-hand combat, he doesn't believe he will lose at all. However, the concern was how long the skill would last and how many minutes he had remaining. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hector instructed his monsters not to attack recklessly, but to use magic to target the human. The monsters agreed and began firing magic bullets. Upon seeing the magic, the protagonist tensed, realizing the danger, and was quite surprised to realize that it was indeed magic. However, luckily for her, the girl used a spell from Sylphie, the spirit of the wind, and blocked the attacks. Seeing this, the protagonist asked in surprise if it was a spell. He himself realized the power being used and that, furthermore, it was being used by borrowing the power of spirits, an art exclusive to elves. The girl, confirming his question, thanked the protagonist, mentioning that thanks to him, the spirit seemed able to rest a little. Frustrated, Hector declared that they wouldn't win at this rate, and decided to join the fight himself. The protagonist became serious and, he asked the elf girl if she could prevent the other soldiers from interfering, because the protagonist wanted to confront and eliminate the boss directly. The girl, for her part, on the other hand, she replied that she could handle it and asked the protagonist to stop calling her an elf, insisting that her name was Maïr. The protagonist acknowledged her request and expressed his confidence that she would take care of the other members, but addressed her as the wise man's disciple. Maïr became furious and shouted that her name was Maïr, but she quickly grew frustrated and asked the protagonist to disregard it. The protagonist faced Hector head-on, only to discover that Hector was incredibly strong. As their swords clashed, the protagonist seized an opportunity, using Hector's sword were heavily guarded, making it difficult to sneak in. He knew the extent of the trouble he would be in if he were caught, so he decided against it, as there was no need to propel himself into the air. However, when he attacked Hector with his knives, Hector easily blocked the attack with his own sword. Hector then counterattacked, but the protagonist dodged the blow, quickly managing to cut him with the knife. Hector sustained some damage and admitted he was surprised the protagonist had predicted his attack, acknowledging it as a good attempt. However, we see that it wasn't Hector who was injured, but rather our protagonist. The protagonist was surprised to see that the wound wasn't superficial and tensed up when he realizing the power of a high-ranking demon, understanding that he would likely be dead without his foresight ability. Hector commented that if the protagonist wasn't human, he could have easily defeated him. The protagonist then used his appraisal skill to check Hector's status, and found that, in addition to his physical capabilities and sharp senses as a high-ranking demon, Hector also possessed level 5 swordsmanship. Realizing he had a significant disadvantage in direct combat with Hector, even with his foresight ability, he decided to try a new strategy. Hector yelled at the protagonist that if he wasn't coming to him, then he would go and fight the protagonist himself. Despite this, the protagonist managed to dodge Hector's attack, but when Hector attacked again, he somehow managed to graze his arm. Hector's attack left our protagonist tense, and he realized that there was no point in predicting the future if his body couldn't keep up with it. As the physical gap between them was too great for him at that moment, he carefully considered his next move. Hector, for his part, laughed and mocked the protagonist, but suddenly the protagonist pulled out his gun and shot at Hector, but Hector easily blocked the bullets with his reflexes. It's better not to rush things and return at another time. Meanwhile, in an open field, Rena was searching for a suitable location, and her two henchmen were with her, ready to practice their new skills, using his hand. The protagonist saw that and was relieved that the bullets had penetrated Hector's hand and injured him. Hector was stunned and screamed, demanding to know what kind of device I was using. The protagonist. This was quite insolent in his eyes, so Hector Furioso attacked the prota, who was prepared to fire his weapon again. However, Hector he dodged the bullets and advised the prota not to underestimate him, as he could easily predict the bullet's trajectory. The prota ran out of bullets, so he threw knives at Hector, who blocked them with his sword. Suddenly, he got very close to Hector, and, to Hector's surprise, he stopped attacking and sat silently on the ground. But before Hector could react, the prota threw a bomb at him. Hector wondered what it was and ran towards the protagonist to attack. However, before he could reach the prota, the bomb exploded, hitting Hector head-on, and also impacting the other monsters, who were visibly worried. Even Mare was surprised to see this, and wondered who the prota really was, since was displaying some truly incredible skills. Furthermore, she noticed that the protagonist was dominating a high-ranking demon, even though he was human. On the other hand, the protagonist was ready with a knife in his hand, simply because he realized that he had no ammunition left for the weapon he kept as an emergency, and that the grenade had been his last resort. Furthermore, upon seeing Hector get back on his feet, the protagonist realized that relying on weapons and grenades alone would not be enough to defeat him. Hector was now furious because the protagonist was using unfamiliar devices in their fight, so Hector furiously attacked the protagonist with the intention of eliminating him once and for all. However, given the situation, the protagonist decided they began to conjure and observe their respective elements, because Rena was curious to learn more about the whole subject of divine protection. Activate his weak point detection skill. But first, he needed to analyze Hector's movements quite carefully. Hector prepared to attack, but the protagonist analyzed he predicted the attack's trajectory and identified its weak point, the neck. Knowing this, he preemptively positioned himself with his knife, ready to counter. At that moment, he moved forward, unknowingly leading himself right into the protagonist's knife. Arajikai, seeing this opening, wasted no time and struck him in the neck. He was surprised, wondering how Arajikai had managed to strike him with such precision. Once Hector was eliminated, the protagonist acknowledged that weak point detection was a powerful ability, but it rapidly drained mana, and he suddenly felt fatigued. Arajikai sat on the ground, tensing up as he realized he was out of mana, which was a terrible situation to be in. News for him. The monsters also noticed that their leader Hector was dead, but seeing that the protagonist was exhausted, they decided to attack him. Mare also tensed up because her mana was exhausted. She wanted to help Arajikai, if only to repay him for saving her. However, she was powerless, and the monsters charged toward our protagonist. But suddenly, someone cast a spell of fire, engulfing the entire group of monsters in flames and annihilating them. Somewhat surprised, the protagonist noticed that Flam's firepower was on a completely different level compared to Nagas's. Suddenly, a voice came from Meyer's side, apologizing for being late. Recognizing this voice with great happiness, Meyer was glad to see her and addressed her as master. Listening to this, the protagonist realized that she was the wise Elvana. The wise woman, who had been searching for Myra, thanked the protagonist, acknowledging that he seemed to have been trying to help. Kai was hiding in a bush, spying on them, when he suddenly felt a strange sensation. The girls also heard an odd noise coming from the bushes. Her disciple, deducing all of this based on the situation. Arajikai replies that it was just a coincidence and asks if she is the great sage Elvana. Elvana confirms with a yes, and he adds that, compared to how she was before, she is now just an old and frail person. Out of curiosity, Arajikai attempted to use his appraisal skill, but his mana was still too low to do so. He knows for sure that the sage was incredibly strong, and he would never be able to defeat her, so he figured there was no point in hiding anything and that he had to be honest with her. Seeing him so pensive, she then asked him if he had any business with her, to which he replied, yes. The Bana said that there's no reason for someone to come to her without a purpose, and he expressed his gratitude for saving his disciple. She promised to do her best to answer his questions. Mir then asked Elvana if they should return home, since the area reeked of blood. Wolves could arrive soon. The sage agreed with the girl and asked Arajikai to accompany them, saying that he also needed some rest. As he walked with them, he considered that the situation was progressing favorably, and that assisting his disciple had been worthwhile. The scene then shifted to some time later, showing the protagonist and the others. They arrived at Del Sabio's residence. After entering, Mir suggested that the protagonist should take a bath. He then inquired of Elvana why she resided in such a secluded location, to which Elvana responded that she had several reasons, but primarily because she wanted to return to nature. Even in retirement, many individuals still sought to exploit her. The protagonist responded that he understood, since the location was, after all, not easily accessible. Elvana shared that sometimes skilled individuals like him would visit her home, and she wasn't the kind of person who would. When it revealed itself, we saw that it was a giant, lizard-like creature, attracted by the girl's magic. Kai quickly used his magic to check the monster's stats, and would turn away those who sought her out. After taking a seat, Arjikai then stated directly that he was one of the hero candidates entrusted with the mission of subjugating the Demon King. Devil. Bana responded by saying that they were the third generation of hero candidates. She also mentioned that she had heard rumors about them, but she never expected that they would already be here. Upon hearing about the third generation, Arajika was stunned. Then, he remembered Leonora's words, which implied that they had summoned multiple hero candidates. Before interrupting his thoughts, the sage mentioned that they had also summoned hero candidates approximately 4 years ago, which was their second summoning, and the first summoning had occurred about 10 years ago. She shared that both generations of hero candidates had gone to subjugate the Demon King, but they were annihilated in the process. Since then, the summoning ritual had been sealed and was never to be used again. But despite being so saintly, Leonora planned to break the taboo and summon the third generation anyway. He opposed the idea because he believed entrusting the fate of a country to someone from another world was unwise, regardless of whether it was a god's wish. Arajikai calmly shared that he had taken care of Leonora, so they shouldn't be able to perform another ritual to summon people from another world. Upon hearing this, Vana was shocked and found it difficult to believe, because she thought it was impossible for him to defeat Leonora. Arajikai then smiled and replied that there are various ways to defeat someone, even with a significant gap in skill and power. Hearing this confidently, Vana laughed and replied that it seemed true, but he found it amusing that Leonora was defeated by her own pawn, so he asked if he should say maybe he had somehow escaped, but suddenly, someone pressed a knife to his throat. Terrified and trying to save his life, he told the killer he would give him money, surprised by its overwhelming statistics. Soon, the monster roared and began chasing the girls. Kai concluded that the lizard was strong and aggressive, but it only ran in a straight line, that Leonora had reaped what she sowed. With that being said, the sage now understands his desire, as it is natural for someone like him to want to return home. She then said no. He liked to talk too much, so he would get straight to the point. She came to the conclusion that she couldn't send them back home using her magic. Hearing this, the protagonist was surprised and saddened, but asked if she still had any clues about how they could return home, to which Bana shared that summoning using human magic should be possible, but sending someone back was not. It was no longer feasible because that knowledge had been lost for years, as there was no reason to research it. The protagonist, remembering something, mentioned that Leonora had said the same thing and asked if they ultimately had to defeat the Demon King, and if there was no other option, to which the wise man replied that it was probably the case, or perhaps with the help of the demonic arts, mentioning that with those demonic arts it might be possible to achieve it to a certain extent. Upon hearing about the demonic arts, the protagonist figured that he needed to investigate them. On that topic, the Vana apologized for not being of more help, but expressed gratitude for saving his disciple, promising to let him know if he discovered anything useful. Arajikai then thanked him for his words, and in response, the Vana smiled and suggested that perhaps he might be able to defeat the Demon King, to which our boy replied that he didn't want to undertake such a troublesome job, but if there was no other option, he would have to kill the Demon King. Seeing the anger and murderous intent on Arajikai's face, the sage became tense and thought that Arajikai seemed different compared to the other hero candidates he had encountered, feeling as if he had grown up in a dark and cold place. Lastly, our straight, and also lacked intelligence. Trying to help a little, he threw a knife, successfully penetrating its thick skin. While running, Rena tripped and fell to the ground. The monster boy thanked Elvana for her time and asked her to contact the Adventurers Guild mermaid if she found anything useful. Seeing Arajikai's determination, the sage decided to entrust the elf girl with Arajikai. Just then, the elf girl came out of the bathroom. After her bath, she suggested that our protagonist should bathe as well, considering he must have gotten dirty. After climbing the mountain and fighting the battle, Arajikai agreed with the girl, saying he thought she was right, and decided to take a bath. But before he could enter the bathroom, the sage interrupted them and told Arajikai he had a suggestion. Our protagonist asked what it was, and the sage then asked Arajikai why he didn't take his disciple with him on his journey. The elf girl, hearing this, was stunned and asked if the sage was referring to her as his disciple. The scene then changed to the eastern region of the demon realm of Beldora, the frontline battlefield with the Holy Kingdom of the Servants, where our protagonist and the elf girl were headed towards a certain destination. It seemed that Arajikai had to bring the elf girl accompanied him on his journey. Arajikai praised the weather, mentioning he had heard the climate in the demon territory was harsh. The elf girl replied that the place where they used to be was territory of the Holy Kingdom until recently, and that the harsh climate must be even more severe in the depths of the Beldora Kingdom. The protagonist understood that the territory had been invaded by the Demon King's army. He also mentioned that around the western region of the Urugano mountain range, there is a large city called Nutrar, and that there must have been villages around that city. He also mentioned that currently the city had fallen into the hands of the Demon King's army and had become the front line, which was there, had caught up to her, and was about to step on her when it suddenly stopped moving. When the girls looked around, they saw a knife-piercing destination. He estimated that it would take them about 2 days of walking to get there. Arajikai asked hesitantly what had happened to the people who lived in that town, to which the elf sadly replied that half of the population had been killed, and the other half had been enslaved by demons to perform forced labor, although some people managed to escape to the other side of the mountain. Upon hearing the girl's story, the elf Arajikaya felt understanding and admired her knowledge, feeling that taking her with him on the journey was the right decision. The scene then changed to the past, when the Bana asked Arajikaya about taking Mair on his journey. Arajikaya initially refused, and Mair was shocked and yelled at him to at least consider it. The sage laughed after hearing Arajikaya's comment and advised him not to speak like that. She pointed out that, for someone who had recently arrived in this world, she could be very useful due to her extensive knowledge passed down from generation to generation. The sage also mentioned that she had been looking for an opportunity to send Maira on a trip, but she was worried about sending her beloved disciple off alone. Hearing this, Arajikai seemed puzzled and asked Elvana why she was entrusting the elf girl to him, since Elvana could have taken her on the journey herself. The sage then replied that she no longer had the ability to embark on journeys on her own. Although she appears young and healthy from a human perspective, her time and abilities were limited, but suddenly, someone appeared and saved her disciple's life. She also expressed her gratitude, but she needed time to think. Before the elf girl could finish her sentence, our protagonist interrupted and stated that he was planning to infiltrate the territory. Its head, and it was bleeding. They wondered if someone had saved them, but with no time to answer their question, they decided not to stay there any longer and left. Kay had no reason to. Of the demons, warning her that it would be a dangerous journey. He emphasized that if the elf girl slowed him down, he would leave her behind. So the sage approached the girl and reminded her that ultimately, it was his decision, as it was his life, after all. Upon hearing this, the young woman exclaimed that she understood and declared that she was ready to go with Arajikai. The scene cuts back to the present, where Arajikai tensely commented that the girl looked tired. He reminded her that they still had a full day of hiking ahead, in case she hadn't noticed. The mayor advised him not to expect too much from a spellcaster's body, since she had been physically training the entire time despite focusing on magic, so Arajikai suggested that they end the day and rest. Hearing this, Mayor was surprised and asked if he hadn't said that he would leave her behind if she slowed him down. Our protagonist asked May what kind of nonsense she was talking about and assured her that he wouldn't abandon her for that reason. Then, he told her to hurry up and set up camp. The girl was impressed by his response and replied that she understood and that he would prepare it in a few minutes. The scene then transitioned to nighttime, with Arajikai and the girl sitting around the bonfire. The girl was eating, and our protagonist was watching her, hesitant. He then mentioned that she probably already understood, but that the journey would soon become dangerous, and that he wouldn't hesitate, even if the journey became dangerous, because he was determined to return to his home world. However, he acknowledged that the girl might not have such a compelling reason to join him thus far. Our boy then inquired if he was correct in assuming that Van wasn't lying and that the girl had her own reasons for joining him. May responded that she didn't know how to explain it well, but that she had experienced the save them, but his conscience wouldn't let him ignore the situation. He thought to himself that things weren't going to be easy and that monsters like that were roaming freely around this loss of her previous home. The elven village had been destroyed by the Demon King's army. Hearing this, Arajikai asked if the war wasn't supposed to be between humans and monsters. The girl then replied that such distinctions were trivial, since demons overwhelmed all races regardless. She explained that her father, her mother, and even her little brother had been murdered. She survived only because her father sacrificed himself as bait to distract the monster's attention from her. She also recounted that during that time, she was completely helpless. And then, after the Demon King's army abandoned the village, she was presumed dead and left behind. It was then that the wise man found her and took her in, eventually training her to become his teacher and mentor. Our protagonist declared that he wasn't interested in her past, he only wanted to know her goal. The girl retorted that he should have already deduced it from her story. The reason she became a disciple of the wise man and a spellcaster was to gain the power necessary to defeat the monsters. At that moment, the girl's eyes were filled with fury and vengeance as she declared that everything that had happened, learned from her teacher over the past 10 years, including all of her training, was entirely for the sake of revenge. She vowed to personally end the man who had killed his family with his own hands. Our boy was surprised and asked her the name of the demon, to which the girl replied that it was one of the 4 heavenly kings, Windberg, who was known as the Heavenly King of Wind and also one of the highest-ranking leaders in the Demon King's army. Arajikai then asked if the reason the girl agreed to join him was to get closer to Windberg. He also mentioned that, for now, he didn't have any personal reason to fight the demons. The girl also mentioned that she didn't understand why. He approached the monster's body when, suddenly, he felt someone was close by. He hid behind the monster's body and looked around, but he didn't see. The Bana had given him permission after meeting Arajikai. Since they were talking about her teacher, she admitted that she didn't know what the Bana was thinking, and that was why she would follow the instructions from our protagonist for the time being. Arajikai replied that he understood his situation, and then he recalled that the sage had asked him to take care of the girl and trusted that the protagonist would be able to handle her. Our boy then understood why the wise man hadn't allowed his disciple to travel alone. If he had, the girl might have risked her life in pursuit of her revenge. The girl apologized to Arajikai for bringing up such a heavy topic and assured him not to worry, as she didn't want to involve him in her quest for revenge. Arajikai understood that the girl was determined to get revenge herself, and he asked her to end the conversation and go to sleep, since they had to take a trip the next day. The girl agreed and mentioned that she would establish spirits to keep watch, which would alert them if any monsters approached while the girls slept peacefully. Our protagonist, he contemplated the Demon King's army's 4 heavenly kings while watching the girl sleep peacefully. Then, he quietly slipped out of the tent. He reflected on how his previous enemy had been a high-ranking demon, and now he was facing an even stronger one. It was at that moment he realized that they needed to become stronger before facing such powerful enemies. But our protagonist quickly decided to push those thoughts aside. For the time being, he acknowledged that worrying about it was unproductive. At that moment, the scene shifted to the western corner of the Holy Kingdom, to the fort where the high-ranking officials declared that, now with the hero candidates present, it was time. Nobody. After this, our protagonist also returned to his room to avoid any trouble. Once he left, a person emerged from behind a faction, suitable to move on the offensive. Others agreed and inquired as to where they should begin their attack. Amelia also suggested that attacking the fort would be a good start, seeing as it used to be hers, strong, making this an opportunity to reclaim it, as it currently serves as their primary frontline base. He mentioned that if they manage to breach it, the enemy will be forced to retreat. Heinrich countered that it was a reckless plan, emphasizing that they had maintained a defensive posture until now. So, why suddenly switch to an offensive strategy? The high-ranking officials, they questioned the boy about the implications, even if those hero candidates were under his command. Amelia agreed that Heinrich had a point, but the enemy might still be underestimating them, which would help ensure the demons wouldn't anticipate a sudden offensive. He then inquired of Midusuji whether his body had been discovered. Midusuji confirmed that it had, and added that, if he were ordered to fight, he would wield his sword. Following that, Heinrich, Midukujuki, and Asimoto returned. Heinrich announced that the plan would be executed the following day, noting that it was unusual. Why Amelia was being so aggressive. Asamoto asked if he thought the plan would proceed without a hitch, mentioning that everyone backstage seemed quite confident. Suji replied that if they were going to go through with it regardless, it was better to take the offensive. It was good to be on the offensive while the enemy was still regrouping, so he believed it wasn't a mistake. Heinrich responded that they were relying too much on the hero, the candidate's power, and their abilities, which was making them overconfident. He also said that even though they were only reinforcing their defenses outside of his direct command, they couldn't disobey a direct order from their superiors. Asimoto tensely asked if they had no other choice. Heinrich responded, "Of course, I will continue to support them to the best of my ability, but the wall." The person was covered in a robe, making it impossible to see their face. The person crushed the monster's head, squeezing its eyes out. Hero candidates are still the key to this operation, so please tell them to get a good night's sleep. Suddenly, Suji became tense and wondered what was going on and why. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling, but they had no other choice. The scene then shifted to the next day, near Fort Arus, where the hero candidates and their team, they were ready to attack the fort. Rina questioned why they were attacking at that hour, in the bright light of morning. She wondered if a surprise attack at night would be more effective. Heinrich responded that demons could see clearly in the dark, so attacking at night could actually put them at a disadvantage. Medugi mentioned that he wanted to confirm their strategy, as their goal was to defeat the leading demon, while the main force distracted the other monsters. He pointed out that the leading demon was likely a high-ranking demon. Midoguchi told the hero candidates that he would take the initiative when the battle began, and indicated that if he wasn't around, they should buy him some time, or withdraw. Just then, a guard approached Heinrich and informed him that a message had arrived from the main force, indicating it was time to commence the operation. Heinrich ordered Midosuhi and Alanis Dalabadi, the others to charge without hesitation. They all attacked the fort and broke through the defenses. Amelia yelled for everyone to annihilate the monsters before they knew what was happening. Their actions were being observed by Stonega, king of the demonic army. The scene shifted a few seconds later, showing Heinrich and some hero candidates entering the main tower of the fort. The monsters inside were stunned and tried to attack, but Medugi quickly eliminated them in a matter of seconds. Ys warned Medugi not to lower her guard, since he told himself that he was disappointed after seeing how useless and weak the hero candidates were. But something that seemed strange and suspicious to him was that Kyolia, there was still a high possibility that the enemy leader was in the room. Suddenly, they found themselves surrounded by monsters closing in from both sides. Some hero candidates asked Midosuji what they should do. Einar then instructed Midosuji to leave him the order for the 8th night and proceed towards his objective. Midosuji agreed with Einar's plan and called Rina. She confidently replied that Suji didn't need to tell her, because she knew her role was to eliminate any monsters that stood in their way. The girl unleashed her power, and the others, they teamed up to quickly defeat the monsters in front of them. Finally, when they opened the large door, they were surprised to see a humanoid figure. San asked tensely, "What the hell is this?" Arasi also asked the demon if this was their leader. The demon then revealed that he was one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army, Kansaki, and Asimoto became tense upon hearing this. Midosuji also felt uneasy, realizing that the pressure emanating from the demon was far from normal. The demon then took out his sword and challenged them to a contest of strength. Midogi instructed everyone to prepare, but deep down, he was trying to muster his courage. He knew that if they were defeated by this demon, the sacrifices made by the main force would be in vain, so everyone braced themselves to fight. But, instead of attacking, the demon arrogantly sat down and touched the ground. Midogi was confused, but to his surprise, an orange circle appeared around the demon. The hero candidates tensed up at the sight. Earth rose from the ground, summoning numerous golems that appeared before them, surprising them quite a bit. The demon then ordered the golems to attack and eliminate the hero candidates. Midogi reacted and ordered, was just like him. The next morning, Gaius brought the dead monster's body to the hero candidates, who were shocked to see such a sight. Gallus explained to them that the monster had everyone to hold the golems at bay. Naruni responded affirmatively and began to attack with her natural power, slashing at the golems with sharp blades. Arasi also joined in to pierce the golems with bursts of fire. Arasi laughed, remarking that no matter how many golems there were, those slow-moving golems were no match for them. However, the demon, he then used his magic, causing the broken golems to regenerate their bodies. Seeing the golems regenerate, the hero candidates were shocked and wondered how such a thing was possible. However, they resumed fighting, taking down the golems, only to see them regenerate again. There was a moment when one of the heroes was almost accidentally hit by a golem, but, to their relief, Kensaki used his domination attack to take control of some of the golems. However, when another person tried to strike one of the golems, to their surprise, the golems still managed to retaliate. Asimoto attacked furiously with his telekinesis, destroying the golems. However, much to his frustration, the golems began to regenerate. Again. Shortly after, Arasi voiced his frustration upon realizing that the golems seemed to regenerate endlessly. Just then, Narumi recalled similar situations from manga he had read before, where defeating the summoner was often the best strategy in such cases. So, Narumi suggested to Miduji that he and the others handle the golems, while they should focus on confronting the main demon king. Miduji replied that he understood, and that he and Arasi would deal with the summoner. They charged furiously toward the demon, to attack. The demon smiled, and remarked to the hero candidates that they were underestimating him. The demon then used magic again, summoning stones from the ground, and hurling them towards Miduji, in exchange for his life, but in the next second, the killer slit his throat. The following morning, a young schoolboy was on his way to school, looking exhausted. His name? Been found dead last night near the royal capital, he continued, saying that the demon king had driven the monsters into a frenzy, and as a result, they were craving human flesh, he told the candidates. He tensely tried to dodge the attack by running, but to his surprise, the stones followed him wherever he went. Miduji found himself unable to avoid the stones and was injured. Upon seeing this, everyone called out his name in worry, but Midugi assured them that he was fine, unbeknownst to the demon. This was actually Midusuguji's distraction to allow for Arasi to sneak up behind him for a surprise attack. This surprise attack was successful, as Arasi managed to approach the demon stealthily and deliver a powerful blow, infused with all of his flame power. Everyone watched in anticipation, wondering if Arasi had managed to defeat the demon, but when the smoke and dust cleared, it was revealed that Arasi's attack had collided with a wall made of dust. And to everyone's surprise, the wall then attacked Arasi, striking him like a punch to the stomach, which caused him to faint. The demon laughed mockingly and questioned if that was all the hero candidates were capable of. However, regrettably, we will end this video here, but if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment. But as always, like your good friend, I remind you that the soul of the sluggard craves everything and gets nothing, but the soul of the diligent will be prospered. And with nothing more to say, until next time, heroes who would fight against things like this monster. He asked Steady, who was a researcher, if he had found anything strange about the monster, and Steady replied that there were traces of sorcery, likely used by a demon above the mid-tier level. He said that perhaps they were exploring the area to assess the powers of the new hero candidates. Heroes, Hyun, who was listening to everything, wondered if sorcery was different from magic, and if perhaps it was a new term used by the demons. Suji asked the researcher if that meant the monster was being controlled by a demon. Steady explained that strong demons can use binding spells and, therefore, could control weaker monsters. The guy wanted to explain further, but was dragged away by roosters. Kai considered Steady to be of great. It helps to gather information. But the biggest problem is the fact that this thing was being controlled by someone else. He suddenly realized the true identity of those eyes. What he felt last night was that it was a demon. The demon was clever, because Kai barely noticed it, and he thought that the demon might be around them at that very moment. This could be true, since at that a moment he suddenly felt someone watching him. Oh yes, he told Gaius that they couldn't return to their world without killing the demon anyway, but he also wasn't planning on staying in this world for a long time. The other students also agreed with him. Kai thought it was best that they quickly learn the gravity of the truth. Suddenly, Leonore came in and told them not to. Was Arajikai. He yawned, thinking that having to go to school after working all night was truly awful. Our boy, as you can probably guess, worked as a be afraid, as they simply did not know how to use their powers. But all they needed was some training, since they were from a different world. Their growth rate would be different from that of the people in this world. And so, a week had passed since the students began their training. Kai was reading books in the library and could already understand every letter of the new language. He thought it was quite strange that they were able to communicate with each other. Initially, our protagonist was told that his judgment ability was not suited for battle, so he was excluded from the training, but he was permitted to enter the library. Our protagonist entered the library for that specific purpose, but he couldn't find many books about his history and culture, not even about demons. While observing the others, he tells us that the 5 strongest among them were Arumi, the wind controller, Arasi, with her explosion ability, Kansaki with her telekinesis, Asimoto with his earth power, and Rina with her fire powers. However, there was another person with a growth rate that was clearly www. Extraordinary. It was Suji. She became stronger than the very people from whom she learned swordsmanship. Kai used his power of judgment and noticed that all of her stats were above grade B, whereas just last week they were below grade D. Suddenly, 2 children approached on the street and began to make fun of him. Our hero realized that even the others were looking down on him and becoming insolent after obtaining their new powers. One of the boys attempted to intimidate Kai, but Kai defended himself and threw him to the ground with one punch. At that moment, Leonora and Gaius arrived at the training field. She announced that, because everyone had Ka